Okay, I'd like to call to order the meeting of the Urbana City Council. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Council members Brown. Here. Hazen.
Here.
Hersey.
Here.
Jacobson. Here. Miller.
Here.
Roberts. Here. Wu.
Here.
Mayor Marlin.
Here.
Next up is approval of minutes from previous meetings of November 12th, which was a public hearing, November 18th, and November 25th, which was a special meeting. Is there a motion for approval?
So moved.
I'll second.
Moved by Jared, seconded by Dean. Any corrections? Okay. All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
All those opposed? That motion passes. Are there any additions to the agenda? Good. No additions. I don't believe we have any presentations tonight, so we'll go to public input. So I have a number of cards from the public who wish to speak before the meeting. A couple of people didn't indicate when, and I'll assume you want to go before the meeting, and if that's not the case, we'll go at the time of the topic. Shelley Masser.
Good evening.
Good evening.
I'm here to talk about the trouble in the schools and the proposal to bring police in to help make the schools safe. I've been watching our communities struggle with this for a long time. In the 90s, I wrote for the Octopus around the consent decree in Champaign. And in that context, I went to diversity training in both Urbana and Champaign and watched in shock as trained facilitators delivered poignant, consciousness-raising information to an audience of teachers who were divided. Those who already knew the gist of what they had to say listened, and those who were having none of it sat back, graded papers, rolled their eyes. It was shocking. And I realized then, and continue to realize, that multiculturalism, genuine multiculturalism, is really rare. It takes a constant dedication, commitment to ask people who have been trained, ask people who have been successful, who ask people who have loved different populations from the inside out for their best practices. You can't impose programs on it, and you certainly can't get there bringing untrained police into the schools. It has to be with a commitment on the city level, on the school district level, to constantly putting this elusive goal in front of us. A few weeks ago, I watched an incident on the streets of Urbana where two children, two black kids, they were 10 and 11 or so, were surrounded by 3 cop cars with their lights going, and 2 policemen. The little boys were sitting on the street under the gaze of all of this firepower. Asked a policeman what was going on. He said, well, a neighbor called them in as being up to no good. Well, fine. The point is, any 10-year-old, any 9-year-old surrounded by that kind of negative attention is, it's not good. Kids are sensitive. The police probably knew that and felt that too, but people don't know how to communicate. They don't know how to teach. They don't know how to express resistance. If a child senses that someone doesn't like them, they're going to respond defiantly. I don't know how to deal with that. I couldn't deal with that with my own children. But there are people who know, and we need to keep it constantly under our commitment to get help, get the communication that we need. Final story is that recently a longtime staff person in Urbana retired. And on Facebook, which is, by the way, the new community center for many of us, it became clear that he had contempt for the morality contempt for the communication mechanisms, contempt for the morals of the kids that he had been teaching for over 20 years. These kinds of things are present, and we need to talk about them in ourselves, and I'm not sure that policemen are the answer. It certainly would depend on the policeman. My God, does it depend on the policeman? And it certainly would depend on constant communication and feedback back and forth, and constantly being willing to be aware of when we're blocking, when we're resisting, when we're listening, when we're afraid, when we believe that something is going to dumb down or make us unsafe. I'm talking a lot of, you get the point, I think. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Dan Bechtel.
Good evening. I'm Dan Bechtel. I'm a math teacher at Urbana High School and have been at the high school for the last 18 years and actually have been teaching in Urbana School District for the last 23. I kind of felt that Shelley spoke to Facebook, and actually I think that was kind of an impetus for me wanting to come to this today. I'm friends with a lot of former students, and I think once the conversation about getting police in the schools started, I think there was a lot of misinformation out there about what that looks like from the ground level. And what I wanted to do is just have an opportunity to talk for a second about what it looks like at Urbana High School, and in being there over kind of a long period of time, what the difference has been since we have had a dedicated police officer there at the high school. So I just wanted to sort of speak to that a little bit. Specifically, what happens kind of on the day-to-day, and I recognize my time hasn't started going, so I just wanted to make sure that I didn't take too much time. I apologize. I saw the thing starting moving before, and I'm like, that's what I'm going to have to see when I speak. I don't, at any rate. Basically, in being in a classroom, you've got a lot of stuff to deal with a lot of kids, you've got to teach a lot of things, and you have discipline things that you have to deal with as well. And I think that everybody's been in a place where a kid's gotten in trouble, you've had to manage that situation in a classroom, and then sometimes had to get other people involved to take care of a disciplinary situation. From when I've been at the high school, from the beginning till now, what I do looks absolutely nothing different than it did back then. Something happens, I will talk to a kid, I'll send a kid to their, used to be dean, now it's a student interventionist, and we deal with the situation the way the disciplinary plan is involved. We don't involve the police officers in any way, shape, or form. That is not our role as teachers, and it's not their role as the resource officer to come in and do anything. It has not looked any different since we've had people in the building from my perspective as a teacher. And I think the part that's important to sort of educate on is we've had school resource officers since I got there. That doesn't seem to be something that's in the offing to change. It's just the matter of whether or not we should have somebody that's dedicated for the high school and somebody that's dedicated for the middle school. And if I'm wrong in that, I certainly want to know that. But I guess what I wanted to speak to is the idea that having somebody that is dedicated just to the high school has been a real help and resource for the students, for the staff, and for the administrators and the parents since it's happened from my perspective. I can say very clearly, having Darren in the building, and I call our resource officer Darren because I actually had him as a student his junior and senior year when he was at the high school, has been really helpful. And particularly, I actually, a couple weeks ago, was the victim of an aggravated assault. And this isn't the first time it's happened since I've been at the high school. Actually, the last time that happened was about 15 years ago. And it was a similar situation. There was a student that was trying to get into a classroom that was not supposed to be there. 15 years ago, they were trying to get in to go after a teacher, and I didn't want them to, so I stood in the way and told them not to. A couple weeks ago, it was a student that wasn't supposed to be there that was trying to get into my classroom, who I asked to leave repeatedly and refused to do so, and threatened me at that point in time. Now, I'm clearly here and I have no problems with me. This was taken care of by our administration and our deans. I got the student to leave, everything was okay. But the problem is that in a situation like that, as a teacher, that's none of our field of expertise. We have no idea what to do in that situation, other than let's get somebody here to help out, let's try to make sure everything's in the right place. And none of us want to be in a place where we can say, oh, well, you need to get out of here, you need to leave. It's just, please let me teach my class, please let me go to the next step. And this is the difference between what happened after that 15 years ago and now. I know we had a school resource officer then. 15 years ago, from when that incident occurred to when I went to the expulsion hearing to when I testified in court, I didn't talk to anybody about this. I got a subpoena. I didn't know what I was supposed to do with that. I was a lot younger and had an opportunity to say, what do I do? And somebody tried to help me, but there wasn't really a whole lot of people to guide me along. A couple weeks ago, I said, I don't know what to do, but get this kid out. When they got out, an administrator asked me a couple questions, and I said, look, I don't know the right step to take here. What should I do? And they said, would you like to talk to our resource officer? I said, yeah, I'd love it if I could talk to Darren. Darren came up, answered a lot of questions, asked me a lot of questions, told me what the next steps were going to be. I didn't have to make a decision as a teacher because I had a resource, which is in the name, to be able to help answer my questions, to de-escalate me, to talk to the student about what was going on, and to take the next steps. Now, at this point in time, the courts have gotten involved, but that is something that followed a situation where everybody knew what was going on as opposed to having no idea. And from my perspective as a teacher, what having a school resource officer there allows us to do is to feel like we have somebody to answer our questions. And it's the same for students and for parents. And the idea of having somebody that is divided between two schools with wide variety of needs to try to serve both of them at the same time, in addition to actually having a detective's caseload as well, it seems insane to ask one person to do all of that and to do it effectively. And that's, I think, the reason why I want to support the idea of having this is not because I want more police in schools doing more stuff. That's kind of always been there. I just would like somebody to be there as a true resource to the people there to make sure we know what to do and to de-escalate the situations when something occurs that's not great, but also to help when people have questions and when people have needs. So thank you very much for giving me the time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. Next up is Alan Max Axelrod.
Busy day. Hi, my name is Alan Axelrod. I live at 814 Sunset Drive. I first want to caution with anecdotes that talk about the need for school resource officers, in particular emphasizing that there was not a need expressed there. That was a successful anecdote with an existing resource. Now, the main thing is this is a lot of money, cumulative between multiple governments that we're talking about. And it's invested totally in one strategy, one mode of operation. We have to be very confident in that mode of operation to invest all those resources without considering or investing further in additional strategies for mitigating the kinds of interactions that we're seeing due to unmitigated trauma due to poverty. How many rich kids are engaging in the kind of conduct that we're concerned about? There's a broader concern here. Thank you.
I have a card from Benjamin Theobald, who does not wish to address the council, but wishes to go on record as being opposed to the School Resource Officer Program intergovernmental agreement. Stuart Levy, or Levy?
Thanks. I'm Stuart Levy of 1108 Foley in Champaign, and I'm here to talk about the proposal for putting over the long term more police in the schools. I guess I was concerned last week. Let's see. I'm very grateful to you, Mary Alice, for having brought up the ProPublica study of isolation in the schools, and I was glad to hear that several people were talking about the need for whoever is in the schools to have adequate training, and that there is some provision for the so-called resource officers to have such training. But one thing that it really concerned me not to hear, I left about 10:15, but so I was here for most of that discussion, was I don't think I heard anybody here really ask whether it's even a good idea, as many of the speakers in the audience were saying, whether it's even a good idea to be putting more police in the schools. You know, I heard a lot about some comment for the need of it. I heard some comment about, you know, mitigation of potential problems, but I didn't hear anybody say, is this really what we want? You know, even if, as I heard at one point, there is some money available for that could be used for the purpose, if it's not a good thing to do, you shouldn't do it. One of my cousins is a social scientist, and some years ago she studied the problem of fights at recess time, because people at the time were talking about saying, well, you know, if recess is really dangerous, we should stop doing it. So she was looking into the causes of those fights, and it wasn't a matter of, you know, the kids weren't sure whether they were going to be punished, and so they would just wantonly go and start fights. There was a structural issue. So within the school, the adults were clearly in charge, and fights were unusual. During the bulk of the recess time, the kids were in charge, not the adults were not. But they sort of knew, you know, what the pecking order was. The really dangerous time, the time that fights would start, was at the very end of recess, during the time of transition, when the kids weren't really in control anymore, but the adults hadn't really taken control. And so the concern was not, you know, some sort of wanton studentness, wanton young peopleness, but a lack of structure. And so, you know, several people during the discussion last week suggested that what's really needed more than bringing police over the long term, bringing more police into the police presence in the schools, would be just bringing more adults into the schools, having more adults around. And there are a lot of adults who would be less expensive to bring into the schools than police would be, and also less threatening. When I see a police officer, it doesn't really worry me, but I know that there are a lot of people, including people who come to the IMC where I spend a lot of time, who are really made very uneasy by the presence of a police officer. And so, you know, if you're trying to add structure to the schools in a way that will calm people and make it less likely for them to fight, you don't want to bring in people that the students in the school are going to be afraid of or angry at. I'll stop with that. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Next is Teresa Sweeney.
Thank you. I'm Teresa Sweeney. I am a community member. I have 2 UHS students, and I'm a nationally certified school psychologist. So I printed and shared a paper copy of the petition in support of the SRO program and the intergovernmental agreement between the school board and the city council, as well as the 94 names who signed the petition. The 94 parents, community members, and staff members who signed did so in less than 24 hours. The petition is still open, and the updated numbers will be shared with the Board of Education at the meeting tomorrow evening. The petition reads as follows. Dear members of the Urbana School District Board of Education and the Urbana City Council, it has come to our attention that USD 116 and the Urbana City Council are in the process of approving a school resource program intergovernmental agreement that formalizes the current staffing level of the 1 SRO at the Urbana Middle School and 1 SRO at the Urbana High School. We, the undersigned, support ratifying this agreement to have 1 full-time SRO at each of the secondary schools. We urge 116, Board of Education, and the Urbana City Council to vote in favor of the intergovernmental agreement with the proposed amendments. And the position was supported by the following stakeholders. And like I said, as of about 10 minutes ago, it was at 94 people signing. Thank you.
Thank you. Next up is Laura Wells, or Well.
Hello. I'd like to thank everyone for their time and make sure my clock gets started because I do have lots to say. I'm an Urbana native. I was born at Provena, that is now OSF. I've been an employee for the Park District on and on for more than half of my life now. Altogether, I've worked almost 15 full years in childcare for the Urbana Park District. I'm also an Urbana voter. I have lived in Urbana my whole life and have happily voted for all of the members sitting here and hopefully in the interests of everyone sitting in this room. I'd like to say that through the Urbana Park District, I currently get to work after school at both Urbana Middle School and Urbana High School. The students there, and I feel like I shouldn't even have to say this out loud, but they are kind, brilliant, wonderful, and important, and being deeply underserved at this point in time. First of all, I just want to go straight into it. Armed police presence doesn't work. A Congressional Research Service did an inconclusive study that wasn't able to show any benefits there. The school survey on crime and safety from 2016 was also similarly inconclusive and said that at no point did the drop in criminality correspond to having police presence at school. I would like to say the other sources that I have for this are more than widely available. If anyone is interested, it's Counselors Not Cops. Has a lot of free resources, but I'll just point out that that includes the New York State Permanent Judicial Commission on Justice for Children, our very own consortium of Chicago school resources, Justice Quarterly, which is a law periodical, the book Discipline in an Urban High School, as well as the book The Worst of Both Worlds, describing how hard it can be for our students to be in schools like that, and finally the Bureau of Justice Statistics. So I would encourage you to look at the information that is actually available on any sort of conclusive, positive change that armed officers will actually impact on our school. So that's the whole doesn't work part. I also think it's absolutely irrational and irresponsible use of our funds. In a U.S. Department of Education study in 2016, we found that in the last 30 years, per student, education at a state and local level has decreased by 28%. Now, that is national level, not Illinois or Urbana, but it's disturbing given that our spending on corrections increased by 44%. These are kids who have no art classes. I teach art after school. I'm very lucky to get to do that. These are kids who have no history classes, no home ec, kids that go home hungry many nights, kids that some of these fights start over whether or not they even get extras for lunch or dinner that we're providing for free because they're not getting fed at homes. These are low-income students. A lot of the students that I work with in particular are Black, Hispanic. Many are queer, some are trans. And yes, by middle school and high school, they do know that about themselves, and they already feel like they're wrong, like they're not being seen, and they certainly won't be heard. My final point is, to me, the most important point, and somebody was very nice to just point it out. Is it right? It's unethical, unjust, and against the values of our schools, our city, and our nation. Now, I actually know the educator from UHS. I actually am a huge fan of him. I have nothing but respect for him. And I appreciated that he said in his moment he felt that he had a lack of training to deal with the situation of a violent student. That is absolutely fair. What I would also point out is that our armed forces were the same ones that mowed down Trayvon Martin, or Sandra Bland was killed in custody. We talk like these issues are all in a vacuum, but they're not. My Black students are frightened. My Hispanic students are frightened that their parents will be deported, that they'll get shot in an accidental thing, or just that they are going to be vilified or thought of as worse than because they are different. I would just like to finally say, please consider other options, the future of our children, and exactly what message we want to send as the city of Urbana. You have Urbana love back there. We have been a source of a lot of beautiful values coming out. I would be incredibly disappointed to see our city make this mistake. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Ben Jocelyn?
I don't feel safe around cops. Most of you look at me, see a 6'1" white dude, not the one likely to be targeted. Many of you would see something different if I felt safer in the society to more adequately and appropriately and freely express my gender identity more often. I wore a skirt to a screening of a video in Champaign a couple months ago, and I was flanked by 2 police officers. Granted, there was other context behind all of that. I'm not sure if they identified me by name or because I was wearing a skirt, but because I was a queer person in that theater, there were 2 police officers, one over each shoulder. I don't feel safe around police officers. There are other people who do not feel safe around police officers. It affects learning environments, and it might not affect learning environments for a lot of children, but it affects the environment for some children. That's not okay. We can say it's not our intention. We can say that our 18-page document between the 2 governments has these intentions. But we know that children have been shot by police officers. We know that children have been slammed into the ground by police officers. We know that these things have happened, and we know that that was not the express intent of the bodies that passed those measures. We know that this is going to cost us $300,000. I've been told by people in power and who've studied it that we need $300,000 a year to run a mental health institution in this area. I am not okay with police in schools, and I am not okay with our money going to things that won't solve the root problem. There's a lot of research that shows that it's not safer. And we can pretend that our police officers, who don't have the intention of doing wrong in their words and in their presentations, are going to do better. We know that they fill our jails with 52 to 73% black people in a county with 13% black people. That's the numbers here, not nationally, but here. And we're considering putting them in the schools. And to pretend that it's irrational for them to have fear if they see police officers goes against all logic and moral code. I know from last week's vote that we don't have the votes to stop it at that time. If you're convinced that there is some crisis, that this is the only way that you're ever going to get this through, put a sunset on it. Give it a year and a half, say, this is what we've done with $300,000. We think it's better than hiring a bunch of grandmothers. Imagine a world where we hire a bunch of grandmothers and community members and people who don't have jobs at $15 an hour, which would be meaningful in their lives. And they'd be respected and safe. Don't bring guns into schools. Don't bring people who haven't spent their lives shepherding children into adulthood, or bring people who've spent their lives shepherding children into adulthood. Bring people who are safe. Please.
Thank you. Mark Enslin? Oh, he chooses not to. You're going to speak
I
anyway.
was planning not to speak, yes, but I would just like to say that I oppose the intergovernmental agreement, and the reasons that people have said I find compelling. Thank you.
Thank you. We have Bishop King James and Reverend Dr. Evelyn B. Underwood. They choose not to address members, but they will go on record as continuously concerned about the Dr. Ellis subdivision sewer problem. And Eldris Melinda Carr on behalf of the Ministerial Alliance regarding the SOR agreement.
Good evening, council
Good evening.
members and Mayor Marlin. I just gave you a updated version of it, so you can.
Okay, thank
the
you.
other one. I'm coming in on behalf of the Minister Alliance of Champaign-Urbana and vicinity, and on October 7th, I read a statement from the Minister Alliance, so I'm going to provide the signed statement to the council to place on file with our concerns. And I know the agreement was posted, but we haven't had time to really look at it, so I wanted to provide this for the mayor and the council. And that's basically it. So, because we haven't had a chance to read the agreement, but we wanted to make sure the concerns were on file, and then after we had a chance to really look at the agreement, we could see if our concerns have been.
Can you speak into the microphone, please?
I'm sorry.
Go ahead.
I'm sorry that to make sure that our concerns were included in the agreement, and we haven't had a chance to read the agreement fully, and we want to have time to do that. So we wanted to provide the statement for you to read, and then we'll see if we have any other concerns after we
Okay.
have a chance to read the agreement. Thank you.
Great, thank you. Does anyone else wish to address the council at this time? Okay. One more? Sure, come on up.
Hi. I put one of those things up there, but I'd rather do it now. It's Charlotte G.
Gotcha, okay, thank you.
So, do I have to start this? So someone else does, cool. So hi, my name is Charlotte G. I work as a tutor, working with this wonderful students of Champaign-Urbana, and let's just be very clear. SRO is a way of, student resource officer is a way of sugarcoating what is effectively an armed police officer. So I think one of the people who came up provided the estimated price of a student resource officer, or more accurately, an armed cop, is $300,000. Doing some research online, the average salary of a school counselor is between $40,000 to $80,000 a year, averaging on the lower end. When one of the individuals came up and brought up the fact that sharing a single police officer between schools is an ineffective measure, so is sharing counselors between schools. There aren't nearly enough counselors in the schools, especially with the dismal teacher-to-student ratios faced by the pretty much the poverty-stricken school district. That, instead of hiring 2 cops with guns and putting them into a public institution, you could hire 3 to 4 counselors, or you could hire 2 counselors and fund more school lunches. It is a very ineffective and is a very irrational use of money to put guns in schools if there are better methods. We have a system that the Urbana School District has been plagued by systematic racism and systematic inequalities. That is why the deans were replaced. That's why they had more student interventionists, because Urbana schools were disproportionately expelling black and brown students. That's where this comes from. And those students are not going to feel safer, those students that are disproportionately being targeted by the student resource officer or school resource officer. They're not going to feel safer being targeted by people with guns. They were already targeted by an administration that was aggressively expelling them. Effectively, this $300,000 it's a gamble on using potentially aggressive force that maybe that will help a systematic issue or a systemic issue targeting students. Okay, I have talked to, and I engage with students frequently, I've talked to students about the violence in Urbana schools. Okay, I've talked to administrators and people that have also engaged with school boards and Urbana schools. The solution isn't guns. The solution isn't cops. The solution is more funding. The solution is more people in schools. The solution is fixing the student-to-teacher ratio. The solution is affordable school lunches so kids don't fight over school lunches. The solution isn't $300,000 for a badge and a pistol. Thank you all. Yes, it's a pleasure to talk to you all. Goodbye, friends.
Thank you. Okay. We'll move on to unfinished business. I don't believe there is any. Next up is reports of the Committee of the Whole. Councilmember Dennis Roberts. Oh, excuse me, I had one other, I forgot to summarize this input. City Council members received emails from 3 people today, or at least I was copied on 3, from LaShonda Cunningham, Rick Bernodis, and Teresa Sweeney, all in support of the School Resource Officer Intergovernmental Agreement. Bill?
And I received an email from Ben Joslin that pretty much summarized what he said here.
Okay. Okay. Any other emails you want to mention for the record? Okay. Dennis?
All right, so the Committee of the Whole that met last week has forwarded to the City Council quite a few different resolutions and ordinances, which we'll go through now. First is ordinance number 2019-11-066, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance. And it's a budget amendment number 3. It's an omnibus amendment, and it was presented by Elizabeth Hannon and Don Ho. It has relates to the cost of road salt, human relations temporary employee, accepting a forestry grant, and from Morton Arboretum, and police budget unspent funds allocations. And for the committee, I move it to be approved.
Second. Moved by Dennis, seconded by Mary Alice. Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmembers Brown?
Yes.
Hazen?
Yes.
Hersey?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Roberts?
Yes.
Wu?
Yes.
Mayor Marlin?
Yes. That motion passes.
Next is Resolution Number 2019-11-049R. It's a resolution authorizing the issuance of capital improvement revenue bonds, Series 2019. And this is to assist the Cunningham Children's Home Project and other actions concerning these bonds. And this was introduced by Elizabeth Hannon. It has to do with a $7 million bond to help construct an education, recreation, and education center. And for the committee, I move approval.
I'll second.
Moved by Dennis, seconded by Bill. Is there any discussion? Charlie?
Just for the record, there was a slightly revised ordinance included in your packet with better language.
With
or
better
filled-in
language.
language, so I assume that's the version we're...
So what we're doing is we're recommending the edited, improved.
Thank you.
Yeah, the edit there was the name of the bank is now the
Oh, yeah.
Morton Community Bank rather than the Champaign-Urbana Lending Center.
That's right.
Okay, will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmembers Brown?
Yes.
Hazen?
Yes.
Hersey?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Roberts?
Yes.
And Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes.
All right. Next is ordinance number 2019-11-068, an ordinance amending the Urbana City Code, Chapter 2, to add a member to the Market at the Square Advisory Board, and this would be a food truck representative. And for the committee, I move approval.
Second.
Moved by Dennis, seconded by Mary Alice. Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmembers Brown?
Yes.
Hazen?
Yes.
Hersey?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Roberts?
Yes.
And Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Next is resolution number 2019-11-051R, a resolution amending certain home investment partnership program loan documents between the City of Urbana and Bristol Place Residences, LP. And for the committee, I move approval.
Second?
Moved by Dennis and seconded by Jared.
That was me.
Yep.
Any discussion?
Could somebody remind me of what that's about? Is there somebody here from the?
Oh, yeah.
Thank you, Lori. I just need to remember. I know it has something to do with the Champaign.
Yes,
Yeah.
the first item here is how Champaign spends their allocation of funds. So it only reallocates their spending. It has nothing to do with the work on this side of Wright Street. But we are the administrators for those funds, so we need to approve this reallocation.
For them to finish building the.
For Bristol, it's to provide 3 units rather than 2 units. I can dig out the specifics if you need it. But.
Okay, no, I just needed remember there.
Yeah.
Okay.
You okay?
Mhm.
Any other questions? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmembers Brown?
Yes.
Hazen?
Yes.
Hersey?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Roberts?
Yes.
And Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Next is resolution number 2019-11-052R, a resolution approving a certain intergovernmental agreement between the City of Urbana and Housing Authority of Champaign County. And for the committee, I move approval.
I'll second.
Or Eric can second it.
Moved by Dennis, seconded by Eric. Is there any discussion? Jared?
We had some changes that were made to the document, including the addition of some language to the review process at the end. I was wondering, Chief, if you wouldn't mind commenting on some of the changes that we've offered from last week.
We're on the Housing Authority.
I'm sorry, we're on the
Agreement.
wrong topic. I forgot we had one more intergovernmental
It's an
agreement.
it's an
for the
IGA,
next
it's just a different
intergovernmental
topic.
agreement. Gave Brian a stroke. He's ready.
We're back on the IGA
apologize.
between the City of Urbana and the Housing Authority. So
Right.
that was moved by Dennis, seconded by Eric. Any questions, discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmembers Brown,
Yes.
Hazen,
Yes.
Hersey,
Yes.
Jacobson.
Yes.
Miller,
Yes.
Roberts.
Yes.
And Wu.
Yes.
That motion passes.
Okay, then we have resolution number 2019-11-050R, a resolution approving an intergovernmental agreement. This has to do with the school resource program, intergovernmental agreement, and a school resource officer, and it's sponsored by the UPD. And for the committee, I moved approval. I will move approval.
I'll second it.
Moved by Dennis, seconded by Dean. And before we get into the questions and discussions, I wanted to finish off public input. We have 2 more people who wish to speak at the time of the agreement. But we do have a motion on the table at this point. First up, Michael Brun.
Hello. Okay. Thank you. My name is Michael Brun. I live at 806 East Washington, and I haven't much to say except a couple things. I went to school here in both Urbana and Champaign, and I engaged in a certain number of altercations, which, because I was white and had relatively good grades, didn't come to anybody's attention. I think that when we look at the kind of problem we're addressing, I think how we visualize the problem affects what kind of solution one wants, whether it's a police officer or a counselor or just having the teachers themselves or community members deal with the problem. It's one thing if the problem is emotional maturity or anger management. It's another thing if it has to deal with everyday kind of conflict resolution. And it's a third thing if one is dealing with issues of gangs or cartels or something like that, where one could imagine violence being a regular part of the business model. So I think what we have to be clear is find out what it is that the problem is we're addressing at Urbana High School. If it is mostly anger management and conflict resolution, then I think there would be no need for a police officer. If one is dealing with a national war against cartels or drug things like what's happening in Mexico, you'll notice that even there's some real question as to how to deal with it. And I think one could debate it further. But I think before the debate goes very far, we have to be clear as to how we identify the problem. And I would otherwise just like to register that I do oppose a police officer, so I am speaking in opposition. But I thought that, having said that, that it would be useful also to talk about how the discussion might proceed usefully further from there. Thank you very much.
Thank you. And last to speak is David Guth.
Good evening. My name is David Guth. I'm a 16-year Urbana resident. I live at 1401 South Smith Road in Urbana. And I have 2 sons in Urbana schools, one a sophomore at UHS and another who is a 5th grader, soon to be UMS student next year. So Mayor Marlin and members of the City Council, what I'm about to share with you will not be news to some of you, as I've spoke about this on the record at the October 1st and November 11th Urbana Board of Education meetings in support of the proposed SRO intergovernmental agreement. For families and community members who are in the audience or watching, I'm not sure we have ever given context for our reason for being so vocal on this issue. My spouse, Julia, and I are here because of a total of 17 instances of physical and verbal assaults on our older son experienced during his 6th grade year at UMS 4 years ago, 12 of which were instigated by the same student. Last week, a parent asked us, where were the teachers while this was occurring? Sadly, our response was that in one of the many violent incidents, the teacher was knocked to the ground along with our son in the middle of class. It was at this point in our journey we began to advocate for the safety and security of all students and teachers. Today, our stance in support of the proposed agreement has not changed, but the growing number of cases of Urbana youth either possessing or using a gun clearly has. We have guns inside the schools. According to recent statistics from the state's attorney's office, the number of delinquency petitions involving boys under the age 18 accused of either possessing or using a gun was 7 in 2017. This number has more than doubled to 16 in 2018. More recently, 25 such related cases were filed as of September 29th, 2019, only 3/4 of the way into the year. According to these statistics, the rate of incidents involving youth either possessing or using a gun has nearly quadrupled in 2 years. Based on the above statistics, as well as Chief Serafin's statement at the November 5th BOE meeting, it's firmly established on public record that the number of local youth possessing or using guns has experienced a significant increase over the past 2 years. Additionally, let the record show that these gun crimes are occurring among the same youth that I mentioned earlier physically and verbally assaulted our son 12 times in 6th grade at UMS 4 years ago. One student, despite the establishment of a no-contact clause and years of intervention from clinical professionals. A brief cursory search of Urbana youth possessing guns generated numerous news articles, but in my email sent to the Board of Education, I shared 3 links to recent significant media releases. The first WCIA report described 3 Urbana youth arrested a few weeks ago in Hoopeston in possession of a gun and stolen vehicle. Their arrest resulted in a police chase in which the 3 youth fled from the vehicle after driving over a street sign and hitting a house. Of the 6 recent incidents in the September 29th News Gazette article titled 6 Recent Cases Involving Juveniles and Guns, 4 involved Urbana youth involved in serious crimes involving guns. Another News Gazette article, Variety of Issues Fueling Rising Gun Crimes Among Area Teens, shared various in-depth perspectives on the variety of issues that are fueling a rise in gun crimes among area youth. In this article, Reverend Willie Comer shares that he once recently asked a group of 20 local boys if they had access to guns. Every kid raised his hand. Chief Serafin stated in the link to the 3rd article above, no matter how we count them or what metric we use, gun crimes are up for 2019. In the same article, State's Attorney Julia Reed states, always the goal in the juvenile prosecution is to accept responsibility, rehabilitate, and move forward to becoming productive citizens. But as she continues to explain, in any case of any public servant, there are competing responsibilities. These are very serious cases. Always the goal is to protect. I encourage all of you to strive to balance these responsibilities as public servants and vote in favor of the proposed SRO intergovernmental agreement with proposed amendments. Thank you.
Thank you. Last is Allison Martell. I apologize. Your card got stuck with some others. Thank you.
Hello there. Is this on? Hi there. My name is Allison Martell. I'm a community member here. I've been here for about 11 years. I came here because I wanted to express my opposition to increasing police presence in our schools. I do not believe that police officers will keep the students safer. I believe more counselors will. I believe more presence, a larger presence of adults will. A better student-teacher ratio will. I believe that the students that are going to be most negatively impacted by this change are going to be some of our most vulnerable students. I believe it's going to affect children of color more. I believe it's going to affect children who deal with disabilities and mental illnesses more. I believe that it's going to affect LGBT youth more. I believe that this move, instead of keeping children safer, it will criminalize them and endanger them. I believe that this is part of the school-to-prison pipeline, and I strongly oppose. And I just wanted to express that to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Does anyone else wish to address the council? Okay. I'm going to take the chair's privilege for a minute and also make a brief statement. I wanted to first of all, thank the Urbana City Council and members of the public for all the feedback that you've provided on this issue. And as you see in the revised document that was in the packet that we'll discuss tonight, we've incorporated a number of the comments, questions, and changes suggested by the public and council members. And the new document reflects, I think, many of the concerns of the public. So I do thank you all for your input and perspective. I also wanted to take a few minutes to address 3 important issues that were raised over the past couple of weeks during comments and discussion. The first issue is related to a belief by some that the City of Urbana is using the SRO program as a way to, quote, balance our budget, end quote. This is false. The budget outlined in the agreement covers the costs of assigning 2 officers plus vehicles and equipment to the school district. The officers will be pulled from existing patrol officers, and the department will then have to fill those 2 positions with new hires. The city will continue to cover extra police costs, such as police overtime at athletic events, as one example. We're also fronting the money to cover the cost of the 2 vehicles for the school resource officers with a 7-year payback period. If for any reason the SRO program ends early, the city will absorb the cost of those vehicles. And I do want to emphasize that the city has invested and will continue to invest in our public schools and children in families in many, many ways. One of the more recent examples is the program we initiated last year. It's a mentoring and enrichment program for young men at Urbana High School. It's led by our community relations specialist, Preston James, and he works with Jorge Elvir at the high school. I want to thank them both for the efforts they have made. The Self-Made Kings are off to a good start. And that's just one example of the investment that the city is making in our youth and the time and resources devoted to the school system. We also fund programs and services for youth and families in many different ways through social service grant funding and other grants. These range from things like the Urbana Neighborhood Connection Center, which serves youth after school, and to First Families, which is an innovative new program that helps stabilize families and in the long run will help the kids who need it the most in our schools. And this year we're making, and from here on out, we're going to be making a more concerted effort toward preventing homelessness and improving housing security through a variety of measures using our federal and state grant programs, our continued cooperation, partnership with Habitat for Humanity, rental assistance, our transitional housing efforts, construction of new affordable housing in the city of Urbana, and a closer collaboration with both Cunningham Township, Champaign Township, and the city of Champaign and the Housing Authority. So our focus is going to be on housing and housing security, and that too will help get to the societal context surrounding and that are causing so much trauma in our youth. But I wanted to emphasize again, the city is not balancing our budget through this agreement. This is a partnership with the school district. The second issue I wanted to address is we heard frequently a general characterization of police as, quote, being violent and punitive. Those were terms that were used. The continued fear, and I acknowledge the fear and how people are uncomfortable in the presence, could be uncomfortable in the presence of police. But I really think that that is unfair to the officers who are serving the city of Urbana, who are currently in the schools today and who are on the streets. And while these comments were being made, one of the school resource officers, Miss Michelle Robinson, was sitting in the back of the room. And if you had to describe an officer, those are not the words that you could use to describe her. We've heard from the principal of the middle school, the high school, faculty and staff, how important Miss Robinson has been since February of last year when she's been in the school. And I personally have never met an officer more committed, passionate, or caring about the kids that she serves in that middle school. And I've she's described to me what she does day in and day out, and the range and variety and effort she puts into her job is astonishing. Same goes for Darren McCartney. They're both graduates of the Urbana School District as well. So Urbana officers are smart, they're well disciplined, and they're well trained. And I urge us all, and the public, and the students, to take the time to understand the SRO's role in the school, and more importantly, to make a concerted effort, and it'll be on both parts, to get to know one another. This school resource officer is about building relationships in the community and with students, and that's what the success of the program is going to be dependent on. But we need open minds on all sides to building those relationships, and I think we as adults in the community, as parents, as teachers, as leaders, we need to demonstrate that commitment. It starts with us. And then the third issue I wanted to discuss just briefly or touch on is the centering of the conversation about school resource officers around, quote, the presence of armed officers in the school, or armed cops in the school, or more guns in the school. And that's been very prevalent in social media and in some of the discussion here and at the school board. Yes, like every other sworn police officer, the school resource officers carry a gun. And like every other trained police officer, it's highly unlikely that gun is ever going to come out of its holster. And I think the focus on guns carried by the resource officer in the school is diverting attention from the very, very real issue of guns in our community, gun violence in our community, and how gun violence is now touching and reaching and traumatizing our neighborhoods and our youth. And Mr. Guth touched on that earlier. I think we need to, our focus, every one of our focuses, should not be on the guns in the holsters, but the guns in the hands of our children and the guns on the street and what it's doing to our kids and to our families. We need to be looking at the social context surrounding it. We also need to be terribly concerned about how tragically easy it is for kids to access guns. Just a few of the incidents, and I'll go over, I want to touch on those, just a few of the incidents over the past year. And in fact, a 10-year-old boy is fighting for his life as we sit here after being shot twice last night through someone shooting into their house. This past summer, a 15-year-old Urbana youth accidentally shot himself in the groin. He apparently had tucked a loaded weapon into his waistband. That sort of thing might work in the movies, but it has tragic consequences in real life. In the past year or so, a teenager accidentally shot and killed his 14-year-old friend. Another 15-year-old boy was shot in front of his house and killed. This past summer, a teen was shot in the arm in Urbana. Last school year, a student brought over 40 rounds of ammunition in a backpack into Urbana High School. And then just summer, and this is especially alarming, is 30 vehicles were reported burglarized in July and August of this year. All of these vehicle burglaries were unlocked vehicles, and among the many valuables reported stolen were 3 weapons. Now, we know that vehicle burglaries are crimes of opportunity, and more often than not, they're done by kids and teens ruffling through cars. Kids know that people are keeping guns in unlocked vehicles, and they know how to get them, and they're getting their hands on weapons with absolutely no idea how to handle them. And we're seeing incidents of children displaying BB guns and airsoft guns, which look just like the real thing, and they don't understand how this puts themselves, their friends in danger, and leads to contact with law enforcement. And nationwide, over twice as many gun-related suicides, there are over twice as many gun-related suicides than gun-related murders or homicides, and a significant number of these are teens. So I urge us all to keep the focus on the guns that are harming our kids, traumatizing our neighborhoods, not the guns worn by the SROs. But again, thank you for the input on this topic, and we look forward to the discussion tonight. I will point out once again that the intergovernmental agreement that is before the council right now is the same as what's in the packet, except there is a change in Section 8, and it reflects language that was added by at the request of the school district, and it's related to confidentiality. But the substantial intent of the amendment is the same as what the council passed last week. So we have a motion on the floor. I do have a report by Chief Seraphin.
I will keep this brief, as we spent a lot of time last week, and you heard my opening remarks then. I did, I just wanted to explain a couple of things. First, Mr. Brown's question regarding the search authority of the school resource officers. So I wanted to make sure I would clarify this, that indeed school officials do have a greater search authority than a law enforcement officer on the street. When that law enforcement officer is then in the schools, and in this particular case acting as a school official, they would then inherit that greater search authority. But this is where I wanted to make sure it was clear that that capacity is part of their partnership with the school officials. And all of those searches, 99% of those searches have occurred with school officials as part of that investigatory process. So as we kind of go through the discussion, if there are extra questions tonight on some of those things, I did bring former school resource officer Lieutenant Matt Bain, who's over here tonight, who might be able to help if you guys have a few extra questions that I might not know the answer to. With regards to my memorandum and the finalized document, first I would like to thank you for your patience as we try to scramble and get all this done with a holiday weekend, trying to get various administrators and attorneys and folks like that to sort of gather around and volley things back and forth. You will see there was just some language changes. I'm referring to my half-page memorandum. You will also see, I believe, Mr. Miller had talked about adding some specific trainings in Section 5A, and so that has been included in this document as well. We also provided an example of an emergency interview situation that was asked about last week. So we did put that in there, and that citation is listed there for you. The program evaluation and the SRO officer evaluation in Section 8 was, I think, the topic of one of the bigger topics of discussion. So using the amendment language that was passed through last week, we used that as our basis. We then refined Section A to exclusively be about that individual school resource officer, and then Section B was about the program itself, again, using the amendment that that council had passed. As you all know, this is not a one governmental organization operation. And so then we have then since worked with the school district and their staff, and as has been said already, if you look at I think most of you should have gotten that into email, but it would have been at a fairly late hour. There should be a document in your hard packet that was on your chairs on page 15, and you will see the finalized language that was there. You will recognize the first, I guess, half as the amended language from last week. The second half is going to be the school district's addition to that with regards to confirming that no information that shouldn't get out, and that's from their lawyers, their attorneys. And then finally, you will see the very last couple of sentences in there has to do with the final program evaluation report. So that's that last paragraph that we just went through is I guess the cause for what you have sort of here at the end of, or at the late hour tonight. So having said that, I will answer questions or find the right person who's here who can answer questions.
Perhaps Superintendent Ivory Tatum could join the chief up here just in case you had questions for her. Any questions? Dennis?
Yeah, hi. Thanks. I went through the document with all the revisions, which I appreciate your having made. And I guess I have some maybe questions for myself that I'd like maybe a little more information about. One maybe is really about bullying. I've had a couple of emails of people who've experienced children who've been bullied sometimes for several years, sometimes causing a lot of trauma and actually requiring psychological counseling after that. When there's bullying in the school, is that considered a civil conflict, and when does it become a criminal act? Who handles bullying when it's observed in the school hallways?
So I guess it would kind of depend on the severity. I think traditionally it would fall under the realm of the school staff. I think when we get into what we might call fighting words and threats, I think that when it might start to escalate into the involvement of the school resource officer.
So we have a bullying policy, a school district policy, and I don't have it. I don't have that with me, the number, but it's under our board policies, bullying, intimidation, and harassment. So we have very specific policies and procedures to investigate every incident of bullying that is reported to us. I know oftentimes some bullying incidents go unreported, so we encourage students to make sure a trusted adult knows about those things, because our administrators have very step-by-step specific things that they're supposed to do and intervene and interview. And so those would start at the school level, even repeated incidents. And again, it is all about severity. And if there were threats and other things like that made, sometimes that is where it might turn into a criminal offense if there were threats of bodily harm or weapons or things like that involved. But I'd say typical, no bullying is good, but most of what we see is kind of that intimidation, repeated teasing, harassing, none which are acceptable or tolerated, but we have very specific school administrator rules and policies that our people should follow before it would be turned over to an SRO.
Yeah, one of the people who sent us a very lengthy and very fact-packed email was LaShonda Cunningham, who was very concerned about that. Her children were harassed quite a bit. And I know that in my own neighborhood, there's a family whose junior high age children decided to leave the public school system because they were both bullied, their brothers, and they opted for home education for a year and a half, and the reason was bullying. And whatever they felt was they just didn't feel comfortable in school anymore. So these are the concerns, and obviously the SRO officer is not the one who's going to initiate that, and of course this has to be brought before the administration, but
Sure.
Sometimes people say that, well, there is nobody there when it happens watching to intervene, and therefore people feel threatened. Children do. All right. Okay, so thanks for that. And then we got a couple things. Talking about after-school sports events where the SRO officer may attend, are they going to be expected to attend a lot of the extracurricular activities? This is considered overtime pay also.
So it would sort of, I guess, again, it would depend perhaps on the activity. So when there are
Football game, whatever?
football games, basketball games, especially with crosstown rivals and games where we might expect a little more activity. Yes, they would be there, and as a matter of fact, then we would, usually in those situations for like a big football game, the SRO would be provided, the city would pay the overtime for that officer, and then if there are other officers needed, then the school district would be billed for those outside of it as a separate matter from the SRO.
And employing them in that sense for extracurricular activity, I mean, I can understand why, security is important, but are they becoming sort of de facto security guards?
I wouldn't call them that. I would say, especially for the crosstown situations, we would want them there because, again, as Mayor Marlin said, and as we've said many, many times, the purpose of this program is that our SROs have relationships with the students, and they know the students, and they know they have connections with them. So it's important for them to, they would be in those spaces and know the students who might need more support or might need an extra eye, or the students that you've alluded to who may be being bullied, or and they can be there and have that watchful eye out for them because they would know those students,
And just
opposed
maybe-
to someone who's there covering and kind of watching for incidents that might happen.
And they would know things that might have happened that day, that Friday before the football game, and know that,
Right.
and know the dynamics and know what's going on and can sort of intervene. So a lot of those same things that we've talked about that are useful during the school day do bleed over into some of those evening, I guess, activities.
And so if there was an event or a situation that was starting to happen in, say, the bleachers, because students would recognize this SRO officer from their daily activities, with interactions with them, that's a person that they could go and say, okay, look, there's something happening over here, please come over and look at it.
I would hope that they would be able to de-escalate even faster those kinds of situations and maybe prevent, because maybe a student might get wind of something or know of something brewing, and instead of just they may not approach a police officer that they're unfamiliar with, but they might go up to the SRO and say, hey, this is what I just heard, or this is what I saw.
And I know that that's been a philosophy of the police department to put people on the ground and in the neighborhoods, because they feel that once you build a rapport with a police officer, you're more likely to then trust them to help you.
Absolutely.
Dennis, can I say just one thing too regarding the after-school activities and football games? Having been a student at Urbana middle and high school and elementary school, I recall every football game and basketball game, even that I went to in middle school when they had the basketball games at Urbana Junior High. There was always a police presence there. That's nothing new.
Okay. All right, thanks. All right, so then another section, Section 6, it's titled Reporting of Serious Crimes. It talks about the record of release forms which get filled out and then released. And I was wondering, who approves the release, that the data that's on the release get released, and this has to do with the Illinois Student Records Act. Is this the administrators who are going to be releasing this, or will this be the
So we have a
SRO.
all school district, and again, this is part of our school code, that we have a release of information that we ask parents or guardians to complete, and that is they're releasing information that they want shared. It might be attendance records, it might be health or medical, discipline information. So the parents and guardians are the ones who actually complete it, and they turn it into the office for us to be able to share that information between, and it isn't just, this isn't just something we use with police, we use this with mental health agencies, social service agencies. The release is pretty standard. We use it for anyone that we're sharing student information with.
Okay. Then, two more things perhaps. A lot of the Section 7, which has to do with standard operating procedures, written procedures, subsection, interaction between SROs and the school district administration, point A, on page 6 and 7. The law enforcement and safety interventions, safety of school and its occupants, talks a lot about, that the officer is there to try to protect the students, oversees student interactions, is not necessarily a disciplinarian unless it becomes what is deemed to be a criminal act. Does this also include observation and surveillance or protection of school property itself, or are we talking mostly about interactions between people? I guess if you see like some event of potential vandalism in the bathroom, is this an administrative issue to be dealt with, or does the SRO step in? I mean, I'm kind of wondering about, as we talk about possible events that happen in a school.
Sure. I will go back to, I guess, it sort of sounds repetitive at times, but this sort of continuum, depending on the severity of it. If we have some kid who's breaking out a window, and there's glass shattering, then the SRO might be more apt to intervene. I don't know, Lieutenant Bain, if there's any story on point that you can think of with regards to that. But again, I would say it's probably more one of severity, depending on the amount of damage or how it's being. I guess again, that's going to be the safety is going to be the number one issue there.
All right. I had a question,
Excuse me,
but I think
did Lieutenant Bain want to add anything?
If you have something that might be, if you don't, that's fine too.
You can take this seat over here. No, it's okay, Carol. There's another seat. This is Lieutenant Matt Bain, who has served as a school resource officer for how many years?
Yeah, good evening. I was the school resource officer from the spring of 2013 till January of 2017. And a lot of the questions, Chief is right, it just depended upon the severity of the situation. Something like a criminal damage was just asked about.
Mm-hmm.
If a kid is writing with a marker in a bathroom stall, obviously I wouldn't go running in there and grabbing this kid and doing something like that. If they're out front destroying school property, breaking a door, breaking a window, breaking a fence that's been done out by the football field, that might be something that I intervene with, because that would be a more severe potential situation.
because of the value of the property involved.
Well, not only the value, but the dangerous artifacts, the glass, the pipes from a fence, something that could be used as a weapon. It was not a very a regular situation. Drawing on the bathroom stall might have been a regular and a more common situation.
Mm-hmm.
Tearing apart a fence and running around with part of that
It needs intervention.
needs intervention.
Okay.
So I would say the most applicable part of this paragraph is the protection and the safety of others. I mean, that is where we would expect an SRO to intervene. If there's possible harm,
Yeah, okay, that makes sense.
I would add that the destruction of property anywhere is against the law.
sure.
So just destroying somebody's property, just because it's school property doesn't make it special. If it was your property, wouldn't you want somebody to intervene? Think
Okay.
about
Okay.
it.
Good answer.
Okay, did anyone else have questions?
Oh, I have one more.
One more, okay.
Please. I mean, I'm trying to be thorough at my turn, and then I'll get everybody else to have all their turns. In section 7A, under arrests, this is on page 10, it talks about student searches, and it says item number 3 under that, subsection B, item number 3, on page 10. When feasible, the search should be conducted by a certified employee or SRO of the same sex as the student. So I was wondering if it means that the two SROs that are going to be employed at the school, does one need to be male and one need to be female? Or are we going to depend upon staff or school administrators to fulfill those two different requirements?
I would, I want us to pick the best fit for each school when it comes to the SROs. And so that might vary or flip-flop depending on who's interested in the pool of available patrol officers. When it comes to these types of things, we have a similar policy for the street. When feasible, at 2 in the morning, and there's some arrest being made, we will attempt to do that if we can. There are certain procedures and witnessing and other things we can do if that's simply not an option. Here we'll have a lot more options because you'll have school staff
Mhm.
and others there that should be able to help in that situation.
And they could step in then and
So
help?
2 and 3 basically go together. There's an and there.
Yeah.
So in the presence of a school administrator or adult witness and an employee or SRO. So right now, the way we handle this is Darren is a male, but we have a female. You met her last week, Julie Blixen. So if we were to have to search a female student, Darren would be there as well as Ms. Blixen, and Ms. Blixen would be the one who might, if a student, we typically ask the students to do most of that, like pull out their pockets or shake out their hoodie or shake out their backpacks. So our staff members are not patting students down and things like that. We would have the SRO doing that if they, saw something that looked like a weapon. But typically, we would have a female with the male, vice versa at the middle school. Since Ms. Robinson is a female, if she ever had the opportunity where she needed to search a male student, we have several male, the principal or assistant principal who would also be present to be
And
there.
fulfill that requirement?
Yep.
And okay, that's my questions, and I just want to say that I think it's very valuable. Thank you very much, Bryant, for filling in Part B of Section 8, which sets out the format of the evaluation for the program. That was the missing part that Jared talked about for some length, and I think it was a wise thing to ask about. And I felt that it was in the draft, it was an unsolved area about how we're going to review this, how we're going to look at it, how we're going to return to it after 2 years and every year thereafter, and all the details that you've spit out in that kind of explains and fills in the gaps that we hadn't had before, which I think are really important for understanding and evaluating this process. Thank you.
Okay. I think I'm going to go back to Jared because I know he asked his question 2 ordinances ago, a resolution ago. Did you still have questions?
Dennis actually covered most of that initial question. I did have some other questions, but most of my comments are really for council. But I'll let Mary Alice, and
Okay.
if I still have some after other folks have gone, I'll
All
let
right.
you know.
Mary Alice.
All right, I have some, I'll start with the yes/no questions. All right, so yes or no, have we ever had a policy, intergovernmental agreement with the school board with the SROs being in place since the 90s?
Not that I'm aware of.
Okay. Is there anything in here, and I apologize if it's in there, I didn't see it. Is there anything in here that says this agreement is automatically renewed after 2.5 years?
No, I think no. So that is a yes, no.
Okay, so that's a
No.
no. So I got
That's
2
a no.
no's, right?
You got 2
Okay.
no's.
2
I got 2 no's. So just to clarify that, this agreement only covers 2.5 years, and then we have to have a whole other conversation, potentially another agreement, or potentially a renewal of the agreement, but there is nothing in this particular agreement that says it will automatically renew for 2.5 years, or 2 years, or 1 year, whatever the time frame is.
No.
Okay.
I
All
would
right.
like to add to that, but I'm not going to. Just, yes.
Oh, well, now I have longer questions, so if you want to add to that.
Well, no, I just was going to say, I would hope that the data and the review process that we go through would be enough where we wouldn't have to, go through such a lengthy renewal. So that's it. That's all I'll say.
Okay, all right. Chief, I'm wondering if, and I'm sure you have had the opportunity to speak with the chief of police in Champaign, who has 5 SROs, is that number correct?
That's correct. One at
Okay.
each high school, Centennial and Central, and then one at all 3 of the middle schools for
schools.
5 total.
Okay, so I'm wondering if you had an opportunity to speak with him about concerns that have arisen, things that perhaps they want to update or change in terms of their mode of operation, and see how that has potentially been incorporated in this agreement.
So I have talked with him. We have not embedded anything specifically in the agreement based on those conversations. I will tell you certain things that I've learned from talking to other chiefs, and this came about with regards even to simple things like uniforms, that most chiefs would want a full regular uniform, and that's one of the things that that clearly identified, no confusion, not a question about who they are, where we've sort of taken a slightly different approach. for Urbana. But traditionally, a lot of those same things, I think they're a fairly similar sort of day in the life of SRO sort of approach, like how they do it, how they're integrated in the schools, and a lot of those things are, I think, beyond even just Champaign, but most of the SRO programs nationally.
Okay. I actually have two more yes/no questions. I apologize.
Okay.
So has there ever been any kind of formal, informal complaint against the SROs that have been in our schools since the 90s, and that you're aware of, that has come in front of a board, that has come to the chief, has been written?
Not that I'm aware of, and I don't. Not that he's aware of.
Have there been any positive or negative comments about the SROs, the two that we've had in since August?
Well, I know we've had several positives.
Aside from the testimony that we've had,
Sure.
I'm wondering.
I can't speak to any negatives.
I have not been made aware of anything since August, negative about either SRO.
Okay, all right. I'll hold my comments for when we move on.
Any
to another
questions?
stage.
Further questions? Bill?
Yeah, thanks for clarifying the amendment we added. I know we added a couple sentences, and the lawyers added a few more sentences, and then the school district lawyers added a few more. So it got kind of big, but I think it did help clarify it. I did have a couple questions, and also adding the specifying more about the training. I think the training is going to be pretty important. So now it specifies that not only do they need the basic resource officer training certificate, but also juvenile officer certificate. Do we have officers that specialize in juvenile cases now, or do we have juvenile officers?
So juvenile officer is essentially a 40-hour certification, and over the course of the years, it used to be something. When I started, you would, at some point, when you made detective, you might go and they'd send you away for 40 hours. They sent me away to the Park Inn on North Cunningham many moons ago, where I got to, they brought a class, a mobile class through. Now there are other different options to achieve that 40 hours. Sometimes they can take it during the Police Training Institute. So I believe right now we're trying to send as many recruits when they are initially trained to get that 40-hour certification immediately. That's not always necessarily the case, and we might have to backfill. I think we have, like all of the sergeants are, and we've done a better job over the years of trying to get everyone in the department as a certified juvenile officer. That's slightly different than maybe specializing in the cases, where we might have cases where detectives would work. Like we have a juvenile investigator whose sole purpose is investigating juvenile crimes, but those usually have to do with abuse and neglect and other more sensitive areas.
In those kind of trainings, do they cover the differences in psychology as far as the maturing mind and what
Yes.
young people see as being illegal versus just wrong, or versus not a problem?
Yeah, they did when I took it, and I believe they will even expand on that even more in the the basic resource officer school as well.
And then, are all of our officers crisis intervention trained now, CIT?
No.
Are we getting close to most of them, or?
I don't know. It's a slightly different topic. I know there's a bit of a within that. There's a bit of a narrative within the CIT world whether you should have everybody CIT trained. Everyone in the state of Illinois has to have 8 hours of mental health first aid, and we have always asked those who wanted to go to CIT because there has to be a bit of love for that work, and we want to make sure that the people that go want to go to that. So I don't know exactly. I would guess we're probably around half, and if Lieutenant Sanders was here, I'd ask him, but I would guesstimate, as I sit here, probably half of the officers at Urbana are CIT.
It seems like our SROs would be the type that would want to do that. Have they pretty much taken the CIT training?
I don't know if Michelle Robinson is a CIT currently or not. I couldn't answer that.
Okay. And then, in the fight that was in February, was it? The fight in high school? I know there were several court cases that came out of that, and I think one, at least, went to juvenile prison for a while. I don't know if he's still there. Besides that, have there been any other How long have both resource officers been there?
Officer Robinson has been at the middle school since September 5th. Officer McCartney has been at the high school in a 3 days per week fashion since, I want to say, February. And then with overtime to try to cover those Mondays and Fridays. So that's how long each one has been there.
Since he's started, have there been any other juvenile cases go to court from the schools?
I don't know.
Related to school incidents? No.
Okay.
I mean, we've heard tonight several things that have happened in the community involving Urbana youth, but not things that have come directly from the school.
And with Michelle, actually, I did ride along with Officer Robinson about 5 years ago, so I know her a little bit, and we spent a couple hours dealing with some stolen candy at County Market. That's how long ago it was. It was County Market was still open. But I thought she handled that really well, and we waited for the parents and everything, so I can see how you would consider her a good candidate for SRO. But with her going part-time, or previously part-time at the school and part-time officer, it gave her a chance to get out in the community more. And is there going to be something missing if both resource officers are spending more time in the schools and not as much on a beat in the community doing other investigation?
I don't think so. I think one of the things that Michelle has been here for 10 years, Officer Robinson, so she had brought all of that experience in, and I know Principal Wiemelt he even spoke of that she came in and they had some issue and they were scratching their heads, and she goes, oh, that's because this and this, they didn't mesh, and she immediately started to fill those gaps in. I don't know that it's going to necessarily, I don't believe it will in not being on the street. I think it gave her a head start to get in there. And so whoever we would select for the SRO for the high school, the full-time one for the high school, I'm hoping that they would have that sort of same resume, if you will, to bring that knowledge in.
And do you have any plans currently to set a certain period of rotation, like when somebody starts as an SRO, say, you know, we'd like you to stay at least 3 years, and then if you want to rotate out, we'll find somebody else and start training them?
We have not. I know that the SROs have varied in some of their lengths of service. Tim McNutt, I think, has the record at 7 or 8 years. 3 to 4 seems to be something a little more attainable. But no, we have not set any time frame.
Okay, thanks.
Any other questions? Sharice?
Yeah, just got the opportunity to actually go over this letter from the Ministerial Alliance. And so they have 4 questions. And these questions seem to be answered in the new document, but I'm going to ask them just so that you guys will know what those questions are. Does the SRO have full access to any student at any time?
Depending on the severity of what is going on, yes. So if it is a safety issue or weapon related, I know we've talked about some of those, because they would always be acting with an administrator, and our administrators always have access to any student at any time.
Okay, so that's a possible yes.
Yes.
Okay. When a student talks to an SRO voluntarily, do they need to have permission from the parent?
If it's voluntarily, no. I mean, I guess it would depend on what they're sharing. If they're sharing information around a possible event or, giving some insight to the SRO in a prevention manner, then no, they would not. But if there had been some wrongdoing and the SRO was questioning that student, then most definitely we would want the parent
there
and the administrator.
I have a question for my own edification. Are teachers still considered mandated reporters for child abuse and
Yes.
negligence?
All staff, not just teachers.
Okay. I just wanted to understand that. Okay. Will the SRO be privy if, for example, if a teacher feels that a child is being neglected or abused at home, do they go to the SRO? Do they go to the social worker? Do they go to a counselor? Do they call Child and Family Services? what are they required to do? Do they have to do it, or can they report it to an SRO?
A student?
No, a
Oh.
teacher.
Oh, well, sure, they could report it to an SRO, but they don't have to. They're mandated reporters, so they don't
So-
have to tell anyone. They can just report it.
They can just call Child and Family Services
Absolutely.
directly?
Yep.
Okay. That was just for my own knowledge. What will the participation look like? Will a student be asked to participate in informal counseling or consultation, police interviews, voluntary contact, and other general contact with the police without the parent, legal guardian, or attorney, other legal representative being present?
Well, I can try. So there was a lot to that, I think. If I,
Okay, so let's.
if I just got.
What will the participation look like? Apparently, this is, they're going from an earlier draft regarding page 2, where it says our concerns, and they say in the letter, our concerns about the reference to the role of an informal counselor on page 2 of the document, paragraph 6, being presented at the meeting that was last week. So they're talking about page 2, paragraph 6. I've looked for it. I'm not.
So, yeah,
Not
that was
finding
an
it.
earlier draft
Yeah,
where
so-
one of our goals was.
Yeah, so they're asking what will the participation look like? And I know that it's basically been answered in the new revision, in the revised on page 3, where it says SROs are not counselors. And, but I just wanted to address these questions
Sure.
so that they get
I understand.
addressed.
So this came up at one of the board meetings. There's no mandatory participation in any sort of program, specifically with regards to counseling and police interviews as well, so that we don't, we can ask a student, but there's no mandatory.
They don't have to sit in an interview with you without a, because basically it says without the parent, legal guardian, or attorney, other legal representative being present. So the gist that I get from the question is, will a student be asked, that's operative right there, to participate in informal counseling or consultation, blah, 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 without the parent, legal guardian, or attorney, or other representative being present?
And I think it would sort of depend on what the issue kind of is. So if they thought hey, did you see the fight down in the hallway, Fifth Hour? What happened there? As opposed to, you were involved in the fight, I need you to come down and talk to me. So during that interview, the formalized interview, that's when we would go back to the document in here, where the law is really clear on if they're being detained and questioned, and then we have to have parent noticed, and then we coordinate that with the schools. And I don't know, Matt, if there's an example that might be helpful to illustrate how.
Well, I
this-
think that the fight example is a good one. At the high school anyway, a lot of cameras are constantly rolling, and you might not be able to see actually what happened during a fight, but you can see the 18 kids around there holding their cell phones up and recording it. So then we can go back collectively and look for these witnesses and gather that evidence in a situation like that.
So if we look at page 8, I think this answers the question. Number 3, interviews of minor students without permission of the student's parent, guardian are not permitted unless a legal process is presented or in emergency situations. And the last time we were here, we talked about what those emergency situations might be. In situations involving allegations of parental or guardian abuse or neglect. And I think we also talked about if that, again, is that severe safety of others lens.
Okay. And the last question they have in the letter is, if a parent does not want their child or children to talk informally with an SRO, will they be able to opt out of the program?
I'm not exactly sure how to answer that. I would hope that informal talking, hey, how you doing? Did you see the Bears game the other day? Mitch Trubisky's no good. I would hope that we could have those informal conversations, and that's part of what I envision this being at the school, is this ability to sort of create some of those relationships. So I'm not, I guess I would take it on a case-by-case basis if there was for
So
some
you're
reason there
hoping
was
that
some-
it doesn't start off being adversarial in the sense that, you know, if an adult SRO actually speaks to a student, hey, how you doing? Have a good weekend, da-da-da-da-da, that they don't look at him like he's crazy or her,
Sure.
like, you know, you're hoping that some kind of relationship can evolve from having informal.
Correct.
So if a parent doesn't want their child to say anything to the SRO, then no harm, no foul.
Sure.
Correct.
And I think the spirit of what the Ministerial Alliance is wanting to protect, right, is that we're not interviewing students who may have done something wrong, right, with that, not just formal conversations or, hey, how you're doing, or, you know, we're getting to know one another, or I like those Michael Jordan gym shoes you got on, where'd you get them from? This would be more, we're suspecting that a student has done something, and we are needing to talk to that kid, right, and want some information. So I think in again, on page 8, we talk about, you know, the building principal can ask if the parent doesn't want the student, we can put things in writing. If possible, and in any instance, we would do whatever we could to make sure that the parent or guardian was present. So if possible, parent guardians will be given the opportunity to be present during any interview, and if they choose, be represented by legal counsel.
And that's just if the SRO officer has to be involved.
Yes.
But most of the time, SRO's officers will not be involved in issues regarding when a child has to go to the principal's office.
Sure, the principal again, we've talked about, you know, administrator discretion, right? So when an administrator sees the need to elevate it to, you know, this is beyond just an information-seeking conversation. Now I'm going to go and get the SRO because there's more going on here. So I don't know if Officer
And I'll
Bain
say
wants
that
to
the
add.
school did a very good job when they would involve me in speaking to a kid, whether it was even that witness in the fight. They did a very good job contacting the parent, and if, most of the time, if they just explained why, you know, your kid was in trouble, they saw what happened, the parents were okay with it most of the time, as opposed to hearing about it after school. Like, I had to go talk to the police, and then that became an issue. But I'd say the deans that I worked with at the high school did a very good job of that communication. And I made several phone calls myself just to avoid any confusion.
Okay.
And then, yes, if the parent said, I don't want them talking to you, then I didn't.
Okay. So there's not really an opt-out, it's just we have no conversation.
Yep.
Okay.
Any other questions? Dennis?
Just as review, I remember that Jennifer, you were telling us that there were about 23 counselors, CITs, psychological counselors already employed in the school district, and I'm wondering if that...
I think it might be more than 23, but yes, there are many.
And are they distributed mainly in the high school and junior high school, or are these in all the schools, including the elementary?
So, would it be helpful if I just read from what we currently have?
Maybe.
Would that
I
be-
mean,
okay.
because the
And this
community is
is-
concerned whether there's help
Sure.
being available and whether they're being robbed of 2 more positions or
Sure.
not. And I think we ought to bring this out in the open.
Okay, so school social workers, we have 2 at early childhood. We have 6 shared across at each elementary, so each elementary has 1. We also have 2 social work interns that work at the elementary level, so that's a total of 8 for this year. We have 3 at Urbana Middle School. Dr. Weemelt shared that each grade level, 6, 7, and 8, have a social worker assigned to their team. We have 2 at Urbana High School as well. So that's 5 for the secondary level. The clinical professionals, we have 3 at UMS, again, 1 at each grade level. 1.5 at UHS. We staffed that for 2, but we were unable, this position is not an easy one to fill. So right now, that half-time person is being filled with a retiree who can only work 100 days a year, so that technically is a half-time. But when that person leaves at the end of the school year, if she decides to leave, we would be filling that with 2 at Urbana High School. Restorative practices facilitators, Dr. Wemel talked about these as well. At Urbana Middle School, where there are 3, 1 at each grade level. This role basically is the dean role, the former dean role, with a more restorative practices lens. And it mirrors the student interventionist role at the high school. And we have 1 of those, we have 4, I'm sorry. And they don't do them, it isn't like a freshman, sophomore, junior, senior. They are assigned to an interventionist by their alpha, by their last name. So if you're A through, I can't remember the alpha range, but A through G might be with this person, and then on and on and on. So they're kind of split up that way. So then the interventionists get to know the students, and it doesn't matter what grade they're in, if they're a 9th grader or a 12th grader. So there are 4 of those, and again, that is the former dean position. School counselors, we have 3 at UMS, again, 1 for each grade level, 4 at the high school. Student engagement advocates, we have 3 shared across the elementary level, 6 at Urbana Middle School, 4 at Urbana High School. Student relations supervisors, this is the role Ms. Hersey talked about. They were a traditional hall monitor, but now they have a more supervisory role. At the schools, we have 1 at the elementary level, and that is at Dr. Williams, where we have a larger student population there compared to the other elementary buildings. 8 at Urbana Middle School, 11 at Urbana High School. And then we've added several administrative positions in the last year. So we added an assistant principal at Urbana Middle School. To that administrative team has 1 principal, 1 vice principal, 2 associate principals. So they have an assistant principal for each grade level. We have 1 additional AP that was added to Urbana High School last year to add. That team used to just have 4 administrators, now it has 5. 1 principal, 2 associate principals, and 2 assistant principals. We added 2 assistant principals at the elementary level. Dr. Williams has 1, and that one has been in existence since 2016, again, to help with the larger student body there. We recently added 1 to Yankee Ridge and 1 shared between King and Early Childhood to support that new pre-K program. And we also added a licensed teacher position at the high school for the Restore You room.
That's quite a list.
Yes, I didn't add them up to see if it was 23, but I think it might be more than that, but.
Yeah, okay. Okay, thank you.
You're welcome.
Mary Alice.
My final question, sorry about that. My final question has to do with the new language that was added here with Section 8, and all of a sudden this doesn't work here. I'm just going to pull it up. So it says the very last sentence for Section 8, B, says that the final formal program evaluation report shall be provided to the Board of Education, the city, the Urbana City Council, and made available to the general public within 60 days of its completion. So usually what happens for City Council is that everything is posted online. We have a packet up online that everybody can access. How does the Board of Education distribute these types of reports to the public?
So we would share them in a public meeting. We usually post all of our documents prior to when we notice the meeting ahead of time. So we've not followed the 60-day. I kind of like that, but we've not done that. The 60-day time frame. We usually notice that when we notice, this is what we're going to talk about, and we would put all artifacts or all related items for public view at that time.
So if you were going to discuss it at a meeting, then those would be part of those meeting materials that would be posted online?
So they'd be posted in advance when we notice the meeting, and as well on the table for people when they enter the meeting to pick up paper copies. And then after the meeting, they would again be put in, if any changes were made, those would be added online.
Is it any time do you put these types of things, like at the library, where people who don't generally have access to an online, any kind of computer?
No, we've not done that, but that's a good idea. We could do that.
I think the more we can distribute the information to the broader community.
Sure.
There was one person, I don't know if we acknowledged his email, who talked a bit about the fact that the City of Urbana and the USD 116 boundaries do not 100% overlap. And the email that he sent to us basically asked for those people outside of the City of Urbana
Sure.
to be included in conversations. So I just kind of wanted to bring that up because I thought it was a really good point. And any way that we can distribute this kind of information prior to having conversations, I think can alleviate hopefully, some of the concerns and some of the questions that people may have. So,
Sure.
All right.
Any other questions? Dean?
I have a motion that we go ahead and vote on this resolution.
Well, I think we need discussion among council members first. This was the question phase. But I do want to ask for discussion, and then we do have a motion already. Okay. Is there discussion? Jared?
Thanks, Mary Alice. She knew it. She knew it was coming. I didn't have any other questions for the folks, the chief or the superintendent, because I think you guys actually hit a lot of them. Some of them were just substantive about the document itself, but my comments are really for you guys, and they're for all of us as leaders. They're not just exclusive for the council. Obviously, we're a public body, so therefore they're for everyone. I do want to give credit where credit is due, and Chief and legal, thank you for the additions that you brought to this, and the extra language that was added to our amendment was a good addition, and I think it's headed in the right direction, though I still think it's falls a little short ultimately. Bill, thanks a lot for even having the wherewithal to add the amendment. You brought a lot more to that last council meeting than I even had the foresight. One of these days I'm going to learn that we can do that and think of doing it ahead of time. I think this is a good learning experience for me. But thanks for bringing that there, because it would have been even harder for me to have a discussion about it without us even including a review process. But I do want to point out to the council and to you all as well that I still have an overarching issue with this, and that's the way not only in which it has been rolled out, but with the substance that has been provided as support for us making this decision. We get a lot of paperwork as council persons. You guys don't see our packets all the time, but they're full of stuff. There's a lot of reading. I put in many hours every week going through, as we all do, to make sure we're very informed and we know a lot about every decision that comes across our desks. With this particular decision, in light of how it stands in our community, the sensitivity around it, I'm still struggling to find substantive documentation and evidence to support why we're doing it. A couple of folks in the audience have raised good questions about why. What is the problem? Do we define the problem that we are trying to solve? I think we maybe have in our heads, but we haven't written it down. We haven't made it clear. We haven't turned that into something more than just us talking about it in my mind. And largely the evidence in support of this has just been reporting given through testimony by the chief and the superintendent. We haven't, seen the kind of substance that we see in even minutia that comes across our desks for zoning ordinances. We considered one earlier that had a packet of paper almost twice the size of what has been given us to the IGA, and the IGA packet is pretty much mostly the IGA. I think the original one had a 1.5-page summary from you, Chief, but it didn't include anything that showed research or, here's all the things we looked at, what we weighed this, here are the pros and cons of this decision. We didn't show, hey, here, and this is something we've done on the council, we've shown, hey, these are things, the trade-offs, these are the things that we're not going to invest in by choosing to invest in these things. None of that consideration was given to us. It was really just brought to us as, here's our great idea, why don't you guys vote on it, and let's get this show on the road. And in that light, that's the issue that I largely have, is that we're not being given a lot of specifics, a lot of timelines, a lot of things that I've seen given to us in matters that I would consider not as important as this. We're still missing a lot of those things. So, I'm talking to you guys as my fellow council members that, we are considering this, we're voting on this, but we've not seen the substance that I think is important to let our community know that we're really concerned and we're really invested in making a smart decision about this, and that we really do have strong, good justification for voting yes and saying this is a good program, this is what it's going to do. I'm super glad that we've added the review process because it's going to allow us some time to come back at it. But this is the problem, is that what we're doing is we're saying that it's okay for us to consider the merits of this program after we've decided to implement it rather than before. And I know maybe some of that has been brought up through our discussions amongst ourselves here, but we haven't allowed a lot of stakeholders to have input from what I can see from the community. I mean, there have been, 4 public meetings regarding this and 4 chances for public input from there, and otherwise people got to send emails to hope that they can get their point across. This is a big issue. It's in-depth, it's detailed, and a simple IGA just isn't enough for me to be able to say, okay, well, we've clearly articulated our position. We're showing how much work we've put into this. It's just the IGA. And the IGA doesn't have a couple of things that I consider critical to the success of a program. We didn't outline our measurable deliverables. We have only a couple simple goals and I think 6 loosely defined criteria we can use to achieve those goals. But we didn't define the problem. There are 2 sections in here, the untoward incident intervention, that did not get any attention. It just says that some sort of SRO will be, or SOP will be created for that. The following section, the investigating suspected criminal activity, also received absolutely no definitions, just that it would be created. It's not in the agreement at this time. Anyway, I'm not going to go through all those details, but you guys get what I'm saying. I hope you understand what I'm saying. I don't think that anybody's got wrong intentions here. That's not what I'm trying to say. But I do think that we have not taken the time and effort to put the kind of consideration to something like this that we should have. And that's my piece.
Any other comments? Sharice.
Dr. Tatum, why do we need SROs?
I thought we were doing discussion. That's a question.
What are the statistics, if you have any, that show that SROs might possibly be a positive force within the high school and middle school's environment?
Okay. So I did not bring my whole SRO folder with me, but why we need SROs? We need that positive presence. We need that relationship for our students we've talked about fear of police, and we need to combat that by having positive role models for the police presence that our students can connect to and build relationships from. We need that prevention aspect, there, that they can intervene quickly. Our administrators are not trained in some of the ways that officers are. We've talked about a lot of trainings that they get that our staff are not privy to and don't have. So it's just another way for us to keep our staff and our students and everyone on our campuses safer.
Okay, and the other thing, because I've heard a lot of people that, kind of repeat what Jared said, that have come up and talked about alternatives to an SRO. And as an educator, the one thing that I remember is coming from my administrators was how I couldn't talk to my kids, how I couldn't, we weren't even allowed to hug our kids when they would want to hug us. There were just certain things. They were talking about alternatives, counselors, older people walking the halls, which my mother used to do, I think along with Reverend Underwood, used to walk the halls, and all these things. But I know that with that comes some liability, in the sense that should something pop off, they have to scatter, because they're not allowed to interact physically with students. Am I understood correctly?
So
I'm
trying
asking
to
you.
understand your question.
Yeah.
So like somebody who is not a staff member needs
Right,
to-
volunteering, walking the
Sure.
halls, so on and so forth, being there for the wisdom that will be totally ignored while they're walking the halls. Am I correct in saying they are not?
We would not want volunteers intervening or, anything like that. We wouldn't want our staff members, to be intervening in the event there were a situation like a fight or something like that. Is that what you're?
Yeah, or any kind of situation where maybe a student would come up to them to talk to them about something personal.
Sure.
What would be the volunteer or hall monitor? We don't do hall monitors anymore, do we?
We do. The student relations supervisors are technically what you would remember as a hall monitor, yes.
Mhm.
So, like, we have mentors, right? We have, hundreds of mentors who, I don't know exactly how many, but we have a lot of mentors, and they're trained in the training that they go through with CU one-to-one. If they have those kinds of questions and concerns, we don't ask them to take it upon themselves to intervene or have those conversations. We ask them to go find an administrator or a staff member to share what a student might have said to them, or if they see something that makes them uncomfortable or gives them pause in the hallway or a bathroom, we ask them to seek out an administrator or an adult school staff member to share that information with.
Do the kids in middle school and high school trust the administrators and the teachers?
I hope so, and that is always our goal, right? Is that they? Yes,
Yeah, I know.
they do.
I know it's a goal.
Yes. I guess I can't speak to every single one of our hundreds of staff, that yes, all of our students, trust every single one, but yes, we have teaching assistants, lunchroom supervisors, just all kinds of staff members that we hope that our students have a connected adult, that if they're in trouble or something is happening, that they have someone at the school that they can go to and talk to about that.
So why do you need an SRO?
So we need SROs. I mean, our SROs are not counselors, all these other things that you're talking about. Our SROs are there to provide another, just a safe presence. They're that positive role model. They're a connected adult. They're a person that our students can go to for help, for support when we've talked about lots of things like bullying. There was a story in the news today, one of the administrators shared with me, an SRO in Milwaukee that prevented we don't know what that student intended to do, but a student went to the SRO and said, I know of a student who has a gun here today. And the SRO quickly intervened and was able to get that weapon out of their school. And so that is a really good example of why we need an SRO.
And we can't continue to offer this sort of service as we've done in the model that we've done it.
Mm-hmm.
Again, this has come up, what we did kind of cutting edge 26 years ago. We can't continue to maintain or do everything that the schools need us to do with a half-time person split between two schools. I just wanted to make one other thing because with her, this is the 6th time I've sat in a public meeting on this topic, starting in October 1st. So I know there's been a lot of discussion about this particular topic, but there has been at least some level of discussion because it's the 6th time that I've been able to do this. So.
Okay.
I do want to interject here. We're approaching 10 o'clock, so I'm going to ask if other people want to weigh in on this, and then if we have time, we'll come back. Mary Alice.
So I've come up with my 3 things. I have 3 things that I just kind of want to say in terms of all of these public inputs, all the testimony, all the times you guys have appeared in front of different people. The first one is one of the statements by the Board of Education really resonated with me. They said that this program was needed because we almost lost control of our schools. That hit home with me when that person said that. The second piece, which I thank Jared for pushing on this last week because it's something I didn't realize that we didn't have an answer to, which was what part of the puzzle does the SRO play within the staff? And what I took away from that was the bridge between what happens outside of the school and what needs to be known inside of the school. I took away from that conversation that the SRO is not the answer, right? There are many people who are part of how we help our kids get through schools. There are the interventionists, there are the school social workers, there are the psychologists, and this is just one member of that group. And then the third thing that I think what I heard a lot from the public testimony is that not all kids feel safe amongst police. And I think that is absolutely true. It has nothing to do with the interactions with the Urbana police. But what happens is that there are a lot of things happening nationally. There's a lot of things, bad things, that have come about from a few police officers. There are people who have died at the hands of police officers. That is undisputable. And those issues come to people. They see that in the news. They hear that from their parents. It makes them afraid that the police are not there to help them. We have a lot of stuff going on nationally with immigration. I worry, even though I know from our standpoint that we're not there to arrest people's parents. We're not there to call up ICE and say, hey, come arrest these people. Those kids don't know that. They don't know that that's not our role, that we're a sanctuary city, that we are not going to be, calling and checking on immigration status. And so this is just a caution that it is not against our current SROs, our current police department, but we have to be cognizant of the national conversation, the national politics that are affecting our students, and how we interact with those students to try and mitigate some of that. So I do agree that the first place to start in that is having positive interactions, being able to see on a personal level, both for the police and for the students. They can learn from one another that this can be a relationship that we can work together, rather than this be an adversarial relationship. But I will be the first one to admit, if there's a cop behind me and I'm driving, I'm going to try and get out of the way, because I haven't done anything wrong, but I don't know what they're going to catch me doing. So that's just driving. That's not a school resource officer or a
that's just
police person.
anybody.
That's anybody. So I want the mayor, I want the police officers and the chief and the school board to really think cautiously. I think that that first person who came up and testified today was talking about reflecting on our behavior, figuring out how that's impacting people and what their perception is and what ideas they're coming into that relationship with. So those are my three things. You probably counted more, but those are my three.
Any other comments? Thank you. Eric?
I have really tried to think about this topic this week and reflect on all of the input on both sides of this. I totally agree that the schools reflect a society in which there is racial injustice, economic injustice, and poverty. And SROs will not solve that. In fact, the school can mitigate that, the school can help students understand that and help staff understand that, but, we can chip away at it little by little. But if we could solve those problems nationally, we probably wouldn't need police anywhere. But but I think that people need to look at the Urbana Police Department. I'm sort of echoing what Mayor Marlin said, but I want to say that I agree with it very strongly. We have an exceptional police department. It's a mistake to judge the Urbana Police Department by bad things that have happened elsewhere. I have looked at the literature, at the research literature on SROs in the schools. And if you average all the results, if you just look across the board, you could definitely make a case that they don't do any good. But the variation from community to community is extraordinary. In some places, they don't work at all, and in other places, they really make a very positive contribution. And what seems to be key to making a positive contribution is to have a very clear memorandum of understanding between the school district and the city, the police department, and for the police department and the school cultures to really be consonant with each other and to really revolve around trying to solve problems rather than to find miscreants. To me, what you're presenting to us sounds as though it has the ingredients of success, and especially given the long history of success of the SROs in the schools under the less formal arrangements that have pertained so far. I'm very, very glad that we're going to have a 2-year review for 2 reasons. One is then we really will know what we're talking about, because we're going to shine a lot of light on everything that has happened and not just be anecdotal but about it, but because if this works as we hope it's going to work, it can be a model for how to do it. So I will vote to support this agreement.
Bill?
Yeah, well, Mary Alice took 2 of my positions, so she said them a lot better than I would have, so thank you for doing that. And Eric took the other one, basically, but I'll add a couple things to what Eric said on the research. I did see one common thread was keeping discipline separate from criminal issues, and I think we've gone over that several times, and that was one common thread that made programs more successful. Another common thing I saw in the research was oftentimes reports of crimes might go up, but the consequences of the crimes will go down, because so there's more minor crimes reported because there's an officer in the school, somebody to report it to, but the officer also understands the backgrounds of the juveniles better. It's not some police officer coming in off the street that doesn't know the person, so the consequences and the charges end up being lower, and that's another common thing I saw in several of the research papers. As far as the piece of the puzzle, I think that's important too. The gentleman that said, what is it you're trying to fix? I think it's all those things. There are gang affiliations and factions in our school and in our community, so we do need tools to address that. I think Tori Exum made that point during the school board too, that it's just one piece of the puzzle. And I've seen numerous, probably over a dozen letters, really thoughtful letters in support, and a number of letters opposed, and so it's something that I think we've all thought a lot about, and we've, it's just one of those things that you think a lot about, you do the research, and you don't see the harm that a lot of people see. I understand definitely the aversion to seeing guns in schools, seeing guns anywhere, but at the same time, put yourself in the position of the police officer and imagine an emergency situation being without the tool that you've trained with to solve that situation, not being able to do anything. And I think looking at it from that perspective helps explain why they would want to carry their gun. So between all those things, I'm going to support this, and I really appreciate all the input that everyone's provided to us. And it's not an easy decision. I think it's something that I would have probably spoken against it at one point 10 years ago. I think seeing how things work and appreciating the value and that our police force has brought to this and the training and everything, and doing the research is probably maybe more willing to support this.
Dennis.
Yeah, I'm going to be supporting it too. I mean, I really do appreciate the community that's come forward and talked about the philosophy of the health culture of our schools. And I think that there are in place professional people in the school system already to address a lot of that. When we have the long list that Superintendent Tatum has given us about restorative practice facilitators, student intervention officers, school counselors, student engagement advocates, student relationship officers, assistant principals and associate principals, clinical professional people, and CITs. These people did not exist in my high school, not in the least. And so, I mean, we have now an enriched backup for the kids who are in the schools. And the students that I talked to who experienced bullying wished that they could walk down the hallways feeling safe. And really it is the, and even LaShondra Cunningham talks about it's interracial bullying that she was concerned about. It's African Americans bullying African Americans. And, I mean, there's bullying in all races and sizes and communities, but it's not, I don't think we can draft this as being African American or people of color versus the elite white people. I think that all children feel susceptible when there is violence in the schoolyard, see people being beat or intimidated in the hallways, slapped on the head as people go by. These are things that nobody wants to experience. When I was a junior high school teacher, we were assigned to be out in the hallway to watch. Well, then the local teachers union, started questioning about the use of that, as far as like concerning the contract that we had with the school board, and that was, we were not specifically asked to do that. But the culture in the school ultimately required us to stand in the hallways and watch as the students file by and to smile and to try to be interactive with them. So I think that this, not only are the administrators trying to take on these roles and the professional people are trying to take on the role, but it's not going to harm us to try for a couple of years to see if we can also make some headway with the SRO. And I think as one a parent told me that let's spend our money and make sure that the students feel safe in our hallways and our classrooms and even on the school playground after school hours whenever possible. And I think the SRO is going to achieve like some kind of bridge. Maybe it's a missing link. We've actually heard that the administrators and staff feel that there's a missing part that could be filled by this position. So, I don't think we're going to be able to solve delinquency, which we hear about nationally, and also there's gun violence we hear about nationally that causes concern. But I feel that the Urbana Police Department has kind of exceeded the expectations of the general community as far as its ability, its training, and its sensitivity. And I'm hoping that if there's any problem, we do have a police review board. Citizens Police Review Board is a place to bring any questions you have about our police department that needs to be addressed in a public manner. And having known some of the members who sit on that board, they haven't had a case in a couple of years and they almost never meet. Why? Because these issues do not ever come to them because they never arise to that severity. So, there is public redress for disagreement in the police department's activities within the community. So anyway, those are things I'm thinking about.
Thank you. Dean?
I guess I should chime in and just say that my position on this has been very clear, and my position on it doesn't change. I'm going to vote in favor of it.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Any final comments? One more brief comment. Sharice?
Just briefly, and I'm going to say this because I was born in Urbana. I went to Urbana schools, elementary schools, junior high schools, graduated class of 79, and I was bullied every year from kindergarten on up. And I didn't have an SRO. And sometimes I didn't have a teacher that I could talk to. A lot of times for me it was a student teacher that saved my butt. So it's not, and to be honest, in high school sometimes it would be the teacher doing the bullying. So, times have changed. And I say this because when there's a shootout around the corner from my house, like it's the OK Corral, I cannot think that that's not going to show up somewhere in District 116. Because it started, whoever's doing it at probably one point attended District 116. And nobody wants to be a prisoner in their own home. And nobody wants to be feeling like they're a prisoner walking down the hall, trying to go from class to class, minding their own business. And I know what that feels like. So I'm supporting the SRO because I think that would be another step in helping some other child that's just trying to go to school do what they want to do and get there safely and get home safely. That's it. There's not always going to be somebody there when the fight starts up. For me, there wasn't. There's not always going to be somebody there when somebody's picking on you. And we always know that there's nobody there when you're getting the cyberbullying, the emails, the tweeting, the all that stuff. But at least there'll be one more person that's got a little bit of pull. See, my teachers didn't have any pull, you know. I'd have to call my mother. So you've got someone that can actually do something in the event that it gets to be that way. And I feel sorry, and I feel sorry for, you know, there were several people too that I got emails from, and Mr. Guth talked about his child trying to go through high school and being bullied every day. And people kind of poo-poo that. That's serious. It affects your health. It affects your mental state, your emotional state. It affects a lot of things. I taught in schools where children committed suicide behind being bullied. So if you think it's not serious, it is. It's serious. So I will be supporting this. Thank you.
I think we're ready to vote. Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmembers Brown?
Yes.
Hazen?
Absolutely, yes.
Hersey?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Miller?
No.
Roberts?
Yes.
Wu?
Yes. That motion passes. We have one more item from the committee. Dennis?
I thought I retired there, but I'm not. Ordinance, lastly, ordinance number 2019-11-067, an ordinance revising the annual budget ordinance, and this budget amendment number 2 omnibus, and this concerns the UPD. Yes.
Second? Moved by Dennis, seconded by Dean. Any discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmembers Brown?
Yes.
Hazen?
Yes.
Hersey?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Miller?
No.
Roberts?
Yes.
Wu?
Yes.
Mayor Marlin?
Yes. This motion passes. Reports of special committees. Reports of officers.
I have an announcement whenever you deem it appropriate.
Sure.
Can I do that now?
You're an officer, yes.
All right. I would like to announce on behalf of the Urbana Park District that they're having a public input meeting on Wednesday, and it's in an open house style format, and it'll be from 4 to 6 p.m. And the topic is they plan to apply for a park grant, PARC, which is a park and recreation facility construction grant. And they're looking for that money so that they could build a health and wellness center in Urbana, which is something that they've been interested in for a long time. So they'd like to just present what they're considering and get some feedback. So that's at the Phillips Recreation Center this Wednesday, 4 to 6 p.m., open house style. Just drop in. Thank you.
Thank you. Any other announcements? Okay, new business. We have ordinance number 2019-12-069, which was an ordinance approving a special use permit for 907 North Lincoln Avenue, the Stow Real Estate Group, plan case 2393 SU-19. This was moved from the special meeting of the Committee of the Whole with 3 conditions to new business. Is there a motion?
I move to vote on ordinance number 2019-12-069 for approval with the
3 conditions.
3 conditions. An ordinance approving a special use permit, 907 North Lincoln Avenue, Stow Real Estate Group, LLC, plan case 2393 SU-19.
I'll second. Oh, go ahead. You can second it.
Okay, help me out here. Who did it?
I started just a half second before Mr.
Yeah,
All right.
yes.
Moved by Sharice,
I was only
seconded
a half
by
second.
Dennis. Any further discussion? Please call the roll.
Councilmembers Brown?
Yes.
Hazen? Hersey?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Roberts?
Yes.
Wu?
Yes.
That motion passes. Next up is ordinance
number 2019-12-070, ordinance approving a special use permit for 802, 804, 806, 808, 810, 812, 814, and 816 Clark Street, 406, 406 and a half, 408 North Lincoln Avenue. This is for the Rail Development Corporation, Plan Case 2362 SU 18.
This ordinance is a corrected ordinance. When it was initially approved back in February, the very lengthy legal description did not explicitly include Mulberry Alley, which had been previously vacated. So this ordinance before you tonight is inclusive of the entire site, which of course was the intent of the original approval.
This is the gather thing?
Yes,
Yeah.
thank you.
Mary Alice.
So are we replacing the original special use permit with this one? Is that the goal?
Yes, so the ordinance that's before you tonight is a repeat of the other ordinance with all of the conditions and everything. The only change is the legal description.
So the other one is null and void. I'm just curious how that works.
Yes, that is, we don't have like amended special use permits. It's basically a new one every time there's a change. So what they needed, so during the closing process, it was determined that this legal description could be improved by having that Mulberry Alley. So this ordinance will provide the developer some assurances that it's included in the approval.
All right, thank you.
Any other questions? Dennis?
Well, no, I could make a motion.
Okay.
I approve it, and I think we should have included this earlier, and, we're just doing some paperwork to make a correction. So I move that ordinance number 2019-12-070, an ordinance approving a special use permit for 802, 804, 806, 808, 810, 812, 814, and 816 Clark Street, and 406, 406 and a half, and 408 North Lincoln Avenue, Rail Development Corporation, Plan Case 2362-SU-18, be approved by City Council.
Second.
Moved by Dennis, seconded by Sharice. Any further discussion? Will the clerk please call the roll?
Councilmembers Brown?
Yes.
Hazen? Yes. Hersey?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes, I guess.
Miller?
Yes.
Roberts?
Yes.
And Wu.
Yes, yes.
That motion passes. Last item on the agenda is a resolution authorizing city support for the Urbana-Champaign Community Bid Package to attract the IHSA Boys Basketball Tournament to State Farm Center. And I have misplaced my memo and resolution. Oh, here it is. As I mentioned in the memo last week, I'm recommending that we budget $7,500 a year for fiscal years 2021, 22, and 23. This money goes to the IHSA Foundation, supports the bid package. The funds donated to the foundation support statewide competitions in non-revenue generating activities, some sports, and then non-sports activities like scholastic ball, some of the music and drama. Statewide contests, and it provides financial assistance to underprivileged high school students and to women and minorities who plan to enter the teaching and coaching profession. If you'll remember, last time a bid package was put together was in 2014. The City of Urbana pledged $5,000 over 5 years. This is for a shorter period of time. This is somewhat higher pledge, but over a shorter period of time. Total pledge is actually lower than what we did last time. It's been about 25 years since this tournament has been in the City of Urbana, or City of Urbana and Champaign, and the format of the tournament has changed, so it's over one weekend instead of two, and I believe it's very important for the city to demonstrate its support of this community-wide effort. And there will be some benefit to the city in terms of hotel motel tax, sales tax, and local motor fuel tax. It's difficult to predict how much. We just haven't done this in so long. With any luck and good fortune, we'll have 2 new hotels available for people to stay in by the time this tournament arrives here in town. So it's So that's different compared to last time. So anyway, I strongly support this. Yes?
I just wanted to say because the other thing you said is that it also helps to fund non-revenue types of things. And maybe a lot of people don't know that's your drama club contest, your music contest, your all-state chorus auditions that schools go participate in. But they also, when I was in high school, we actually had the vocal instrument contest at Urbana one year at least. And being in drama club, we would go to drama club auditions or whatever to try to get all-state drama, I don't know what you want to call it, competition, I guess. You know, so it funds those things, and those types of arts, and many of you know how important music is in school. School's so important, and so are the extracurriculars that don't bring in the revenue. Yeah, the spring musical might bring in a few $100s, and the fall play might bring in a few $100s, but that's generally recycled into those programs that they have at school. So it helps if those programs can also get some kind of funding for their contests and their extra stuff that happens. So
And
I'm all for this.
At one of the meetings we attended, one thing that was pointed out, that it often is the first time that kids will see the University of Illinois campus or even consider the possibility of
That's
attending
true.
school. And that was true for me. When I was 14 years old, I came down for the State Science Fair at the Assembly Hall, formerly known as the Assembly Hall.
That's true.
And it can change kids' lives. So anyway, is there a motion or further comment?
I had a question, but
Sure.
I suppose you need a motion first.
Let's have a motion and then we can continue
I
discussion.
move that we, I don't know how to say this, accept resolution.
Move approval.
Move for approval of resolution number 2019-12-053R, a resolution authorizing city support for the Urbana-Champaign Community Bid Package to attract the IHSA Boys Basketball Tournament to State Farm Center. And
I'll second.
Now, Mary Alice, question.
So I'm in support of this, but I'm also curious where the money is coming from.
That will be determined when we put the budget together.
Okay. I'm also, okay, I'll just say I'm curious, which is true. I'm curious why this is not part of, say, we have the Arts Commission, and they have, people have to come up and say, okay, we want X number of dollars for this event. This is an event. Now, it's not art, but, I mean, we kind of moved and bundled all those types of funding proposals into that commission.
Correct. You're correct. The Public Arts and Culture Commission did expand the focus of that. This doesn't really fit into one of the categories that they would fund as an event. There's one other event that we provide financial support to as a city, and that's the Illinois Marathon, and that does not go through the Public Arts and Culture Commission. All the other music events like Pygmalion and Sweet Corn Festival and Folk and Roots, those have all been moved through arts and culture. So perhaps, Elizabeth, did you want to weigh in? Any, as far as process?
Are we 2 minutes from extinction?
Yeah, we are 2 minutes from extension. Can we have a
I'll move
motion?
to extend the meeting for 7 minutes.
Second.
Okay.
I'll second that.
All right, all those in favor?
Aye.
All opposed? Okay.
Do you want me to comment on the process?
Sure.
I mean, since you have just indicated that we're going to support this, the actual funding wouldn't be required until next fiscal year and then the following fiscal years. So because council supports this, clearly it will be a priority for funding in the budget process.
Seriously.
Question?
Yes.
Or comment? Also, I think the last time we discussed how if if the proposal isn't accepted, we don't pay anything, right?
Correct.
So this is a proposal. If it is accepted, then presumably we get the extra tourism, which should generate extra hotel tax, which would basically pay for itself at this level.
And I do want to thank, I just recycled Bill's resolution that he authored 5 years ago on this.
Oh, thanks. I didn't notice that.
It was quite nice. Thank you.
Well, you know, I think the IHSA tournament used to be a really big thing for high school students, and I think it helps attract top athletes to the school. Maybe if they haven't been here before, their families, their friends, as well as the fans that come from the schools, which include a lot of top students. So I think the U of I really benefits. We benefit from the exposure. There's really nothing bad about it.
Dennis.
As I remember, one of the reasons why we lost it was that it was felt by the association or something that they wanted to look around for cheaper hotel rooms, and that it was the jacking up of all the hotel room prices for that weekend became a burden to the community that was trying to put on the draw people to participate.
Yeah, I'm
So
glad
how
you...
do we like address
well,
that?
I can tell you, this effort is being led by Visit Champaign County, which is a very different organization than it was 25 years ago. And not only are the communities asked to provide some financial support, we're also providing staff resources as well. So, for example, our communications coordinator, Bridget Broyhans, sits on the board of Visit Champaign County, so she's participating in this effort. And then Jason Liggett, our UPTV station manager, sits on the Fan Experience Committee. So there are several subcommittees devoted to this effort to plan for the fan experience for the events surrounding the main event, and working very closely with the hospitality industry, the hotels, the restaurants, et cetera, to make sure that that the fans have a good, positive experience in the town. And you're right, you know, it got, in the years past, one of the complaints that fans had was that the prices were just sky high for hotels, and, you know, price gouging. So that's not going to happen this time.
But,
So-
you know, that's determined by the hotel owners, and it has, we can't control that.
Well, Visit Champaign County works very closely with the industry.
Oh, good to
So
hear that.
I think we're all on board that this is a united community effort, and it's going to take collaboration across the community. So, and again, the bid package is due in early to mid-January, and then a letter of support is due on December 10th from each host community. Any other comments? Will the clerk, this is a roll call. Clerk, please call the roll.
Councilmembers Brown?
Yes.
Hazen?
Yes.
Hersey?
Yes.
Jacobson?
Yes.
Miller?
Yes.
Roberts?
Yes.
And Wu.
Yes. That motion passes. Last item on the agenda is annual meeting schedule and potential rules changes. Can this wait till next time?
Well, I need some direction from council
Okay.
because
How much time do we have left? We have 3 minutes. Okay.
we just need some direction from council from the memo. I need to know if you're interested in pursuing some of this, because then we have to change the city ordinance that sets council meetings as first and third Mondays. And similarly, it is an opportunity to get rid of a rule that we just don't need anymore, because we have, like I said, in the second part of this, the rule on resolution on resolutions has become burdensome, and we just don't need it, given our more advanced rules on public input. So I would, that one is an easy fix. Both of these are quick changes if you go that route. But I do need some input now to prepare those to bring to committee next week.
Input?
Dennis.
Yeah, I'd support it. And one of the reasons is that I really want to see the sequencing of how things come from the Planning Commission, the Zoning Board of Appeals or whatever, to City Council, not to the City Council directly, but to the Committee of the Whole, so that there's appropriate time for the community to catch up on what's happening to maybe do some response, and it gives them a week to do that, and also gives us a week to hear from our constituents. So switching the dates of the city council meetings and the COW doesn't affect anybody but us, and we already meet anyway, so let's just make it more convenient for everybody and make it more transparent.
Mary Alice.
I have 1 minute. All right. The only thing that I need clarification on in terms of the proposal of the swap would be, the sentence just doesn't make sense to me about the negative impact, of the whole thing about the Planning Commission and so forth. I know that the Planning Commission has a set schedule, and we're trying to increase the amount of time that we have to review something before it comes to a final decision, which I fully support. But can we extend the meeting for 3 minutes?
Can we have a motion to extend till 10:45?
I move to extend the meeting till 10:45.
I'll second.
You don't have to take all that time, though, anybody, so.
All in favor?
All those in favor, please say aye.
Aye.
Same sign. Okay.
Dean's not saying aye.
Dean's saying no.
Saying nothing.
Let the record show Dean abstained.
Mum is the word.
So I think it's in reference to there wouldn't be an impact on Plan Commission or Plan Commissioners as they have that set schedule. Their schedule is dependent on right now when City Council meets, so the direction tonight is also appreciated by us because Plan Commission will need to change their bylaws to have it reflect their meeting the Thursday after the first committee of the whole meeting instead of the council meeting in order to make this work. So
The timing is that right now, if something comes directly to city council, and instead of going to, this will add a week because it has a committee meeting in between.
Okay, I understand. Thank you.
Yeah, so it adds an automatic 7 days to, or
All right.
it adds that time period to all cases, period. Whether they come to committee or, per directive, or they go directly to council, it'll still be a week.
Okay,
Next.
all right. That makes sense.
Jared.
Charlie, I did look through those, and I support the swap. I support the rule change needed for that swap. I support getting rid of the resolution of resolutions. I have no problem with doing the 6:30 township meeting, and yep, that's it.
Thank you for those succinct comments.
The
Any other comments?
The last issue is bulky items. Nobody's commented on that. Is there a magic number? Instead of sending out 75 pages of documents, is there a size where we can just simply say, go to the electronic copy? I know, Eric does it for all.
Zero. Zero is the size.
But that AT&T contract, for example, had lots of diagrams and whatever that probably were just not necessary to be included in the packet.
Dennis.
Yeah, well, I'm just a maybe analog or old-fashioned or something like that, but I like to look at stuff, I like to underline it so I can comprehend it, I like to put tags on my thing for questions that I ask, and so I like to have a paper copy, and I ended up printing my own if I have to, but, maybe 20 pages be the max.
Is that a hand up, Eric, or are you
No,
stretching?
no,
Okay.
just stretching, I'm sorry.
Mary Alice, and then Sharice.
I agree. I write all over my stuff, and I bookmark things that I want to do. I think actually 20 pages is too short because I'm looking at the entire stack of paper I have on SROs right now. The agreement itself is 18 pages. So I might put the number up closer to 30 or 35 pages, maybe 30. I think 30 would have covered something like this. Or if there is something that has a huge contract, perhaps that's the limit that we should say. So if it's a giant contract, like the AT&T was a giant contract, we just needed the memo and then the ability to reference the contract. I'd be more open to that, to putting that giant contract online rather than.
I could use some judgment and see.
Use some judgment.
Yeah, I could use some judgment, and then we could just play with it.
Well, and also if we, I'm sorry.
Sharice.
If we, I liked having the paper too, but the other thing is that if, I've asked Charlie, I'm always asking Charlie to print stuff out for me. So I feel comfortable that if, let's say you put a number of whatever pages are on there, if I feel like I really need it, I'll ask you to print it out for me and I'll pick it up.
Yeah, and, you know, yeah, we're getting the packets out pretty consistently on Thursdays. And so, you know, you can see it that night electronically, and just let me know Friday morning, and I can have it in the packet before you pick it up Friday.
Yeah, because I don't want my eyes going blind looking at a computer screen all the time, let me be honest.
Yeah, I think to use judgment, I think the other, I mean, if there's a short memo and a long document, at least include the memo with a big flag that there's additional stuff online or something. I just don't want to miss anything.
Yeah.
Don't, and if there's nothing, but if the whole document's going to be online, be sure to put one page in the packet so that I go look online, because I don't always look online. I'll pick up the packet first usually.
Any other direction for Charlie? Okay, well, with no further business before this council, this meeting is adjourned.